Good morning. This is the Council's 7th work session in which we will review the County Executive's proposed general plan, HOCO by Design. This proceeding this morning is a hybrid meeting, which is held in person and via WebEx teleconference. It is also available to the public via video live stream on the County Council website. Today's session covers Chapter 5, Economic Prosperity and Route 1 Corridor Plan, excluding transportation policies and actions. The Council will hold a third public hearing on September 20th at 7 p.m., and additional work sessions will be held on September 13th at 6:30 p.m. and September 27th at 6:30 p.m. A complete calendar of Council meetings regarding the general plan can be found on the Council's website. This time, I'm going to do a roll call of the members. Vice Chair Young?
Here.
Ms. Walsh?
Here.
Mr. Youngman?
Here.
And Dr. Jones?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. We will now proceed with our agenda. We'll begin with economic prosperity, starting off with a presentation by the HOCO by Design core team for 20 minutes, and then an hour and 10 minutes of council questions. Thank you.
All right, good morning, Council and guests that are here today. Thank you all for being here this morning for our 7th out of 8 work sessions. We're finally coming down the final stretch and have our last work session scheduled next Wednesday evening on September 13th. So as Ms. Rigby said, we are here to discuss the Chapter 5 Economic Prosperity as well as the Route 1 Corridor Plan. Just to note that when we discuss Route 1, we will be holding the corridor-wide transportation-related policies until our next work session when we'll be discussing the County in Motion chapter to keep transportation with transportation. Today we have our HOCO by Design team, including myself and Deputy Directors Mary Kendall and Jessica Bella. Also DPZ Comprehensive Planners Kristen O'Connor, who's at the end of the table here, as well as Kate Bollinger, and our consultant Matt Noonkester, who is virtual from City Explained. Then we also have subject matter experts joining us this morning. We have Jennifer Jones from the Economic Development Authority. She and her team have been really instrumental in helping us prepare for these chapters. And from the Office of Community Sustainability, Tim Latimer and James Zoller. Then we have DPZ's Chief of Zoning, Land Development, and Research, Jeff Goins, Anthony Caltado, and Jeff Brono, who are online, as well as Planning Supervisor Joy Levy. So with those introductions, we'll get started with our economic prosperity presentation, which is about 20 minutes. Then we'll break for discussion, followed by a Route 1 presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate to go ahead and present to you economic prosperity. Thank you.
All right. So economic prosperity, this is Chapter 5, and it includes 7 topics. And we're going to cover key policies and actions for each of these. And overall, this is a chapter that's all about strengthening the county's position as a self-sustaining, diverse employment center. So before we get into the topics, let's start with a little bit of background. As we usually do, go through what we heard from our community engagement. So we heard from the community a lot of interest in expanding both the commercial base and in growing the industrial sector. In addition, we heard about the needs of the workforce. So we heard about housing, transportation, about career development and training. There was also support for small and diverse businesses and recognition that they need affordable space, especially when they're getting started. We also heard desire for more artistic and cultural and entertainment offerings. And then finally, we heard all about the community and its the value it places on local food and the desire to keep farming as a viable activity. So we provided you with some of the quotes that we collected in the process that speak to these issues. And of course, you can find these and more in the engagement summary that's on our website. Oh, got out of the full screen. Let me just get back into it. I think we should be good. All right. And then a little bit of background data, and you've heard about some of this before. So we had RCL Co. prepare a market assessment for the process, and they looked at employment growth in the past. And they found that on average, 3,000 jobs a year were added in the county over the past 10 years, and that the top 3 sectors for jobs were professional and business services, transportation and utilities, so that includes things like warehousing and distribution, and then education and health services. They also looked at the future. They found that they're going to East Columbia. So this allows industrial uses to continue operation, to be integrated alongside future mixed-use redevelopment, and it advances our goals of retaining industrial land, but also seeing redevelopment. And this slide just speaks to some of the types of uses that could fit in this setting. So some of the examples are small commercial kitchens, breweries, art studios, and there's many more that are listed in the plan. Another area of opportunity is the I-70 corridor. So this was pointed out to us by members of our Planning Advisory Committee. And of course, since most of the corridor is outside of the PSA, it would be limited to industrial users that can operate on well and septic, and uses should be sensitive to surrounding rural context. So as far as policies and actions, what the plan calls for is looking at ways to further protect industrial land through the zoning regulations update, determining how to co-locate compatible uses in the industrial mixed-use character area to support continuing operations and also contribute to a sense of place, and then to consider context-sensitive uses along the I-70 corridor. All right, so the next topic has to do with the county's emerging industries. So we're fortunate to have a variety of strong industries like cybersecurity, information technology, R&D, and more. And then there's the green sector that's emerging. So this refers to jobs that produce environmentally friendly goods or processes, and it crosses multiple industries. And like industrial jobs, these are jobs that are accessible to a variety of skill levels. So policies and actions for this topic emphasize continued diversification of the job market and maximizing job growth. And actions support jobs accessible to a variety of skill and education levels, incentives for employers furthering sustainability, and investments in renewable energy and green technologies. So next, this topic, as you know, has come up in our prior work sessions, and it's promoting a healthy jobs housing balance. So our consultants have pointed out that many employers are looking for mixed-use settings, and that the single-use office park of the 80s and 90s is not as desirable as it once was. So, as you know, the plan identifies mixed-use activity centers where employers can locate alongside housing options and amenities. And we've also pointed out previously how projected job growth will result in the need for more housing, and that the county has fewer housing units for each job than nearly every other jurisdiction in the region. So if housing does not keep pace with job growth, it will become more difficult to recruit workers, and employees will have to commute from farther away, contributing to both traffic congestion and sprawl. So the policy here is to create job opportunities through mixed-use activity centers, and actions include, in the zoning regulations update, incorporating an array of housing types, walkability, and open space, allowing densities that will support a range of uses, including convenience retail, ensuring that housing keeps pace with employment growth, and developing a master plan for Gateway, which, as we've noted, is a major opportunity area for both future job and housing growth. All right, so turning next to creating economic vibrancy through arts and culture. HOCO by Design recognizes that the arts and culture are important to the county's quality of life, establish a unique sense of place, create destinations, and boost tourism and economic activity. And the next few slides offer examples of where the arts are part of the economic development strategy for the area. So in Longreach, the arts have been an important component of Longreach Rising. And of course, the Columbia Art Center is located there. Arts and culture are also important in downtown Columbia. The Downtown Columbia Plan, the master plan for downtown, envisions an increasing role for visual and performing arts and identified a need for public art throughout downtown. And then the Ellicott City Watershed Master Plan supports expanding arts-related uses and public art throughout Main Street and suggests exploring an arts and entertainment district, and that's a state designation that provides tax-related incentives for artists and arts organizations. So the policies and actions here focus on ensuring that we incorporate the arts into our existing and future activity centers and public spaces, and that we continue efforts to support the arts in Longreach Village Center, in downtown Columbia, and in Ellicott City. All right, now moving to future trends. So autonomous vehicles, teleworking, and e-commerce are all examples of new technologies and trends that could impact future land use needs. So first with teleworking. So while the pandemic prompted teleworking, since then we've seen that most employers have adopted the hybrid model where employees work both in person and telework instead of all remote environments. And with that shift to hybrid, there could be a greater need for multi-purpose and co-working spaces in the future. E-commerce has also really grown over the past few years, and we noted earlier about how that has led to increased need for warehousing to meet that last mile distribution. So as far as autonomous vehicles, should this grow, it could mean a need for less parking lots, for smaller parking lots. But of course, there's also other things that could reduce that need. For instance, if there's increased use of non-vehicular modes of transportation. So the policies and actions here call for monitoring these new technologies and then adapting zoning regulations in response, and to consider reduced parking ratios if either autonomous vehicles or other technologies or other changes in behavior emerge over the 20-year time frame of the plan. All right, so next we have workforce and small business development. HOCO by Design recognizes that the county needs to invest in workforce development to help close the employment opportunity gap. Another thing that was underscored to us during the pandemic was how reliable broadband is an essential component of both remote learning and remote employment. So the plan also highlights the importance of supporting and growing our small business community as they're locally owned and contribute to a unique sense of place. So policies and actions for this topic include supporting an educated and skilled workforce through increasing job training, workforce development, and reliable broadband. Supporting small business districts and main streets by creating vibrant spaces, encouraging creative uses of commercial space, and providing opportunities for varying sizes of retail, restaurant, and service businesses as redevelopment occurs. All right. And now for the last topic in the chapter, which is sustaining our agricultural economy. So ag is an important economic driver in the county, and in 2017, agricultural sales totaled approximately $27 million. And yet the industry faces challenges, including a lack of affordable farmland, which is particularly difficult for beginning farmers. There's also challenges related to labor shortages and impediments to accessing needed agricultural infrastructure. But on the other hand, there are unique opportunities as far as county residents' desire and demand to purchase locally sourced foods and interest in visiting farms for products, agricultural entertainment, and education. So in this chapter, we talk about how the ag industry could thrive in the future, and we talk about how it requires certain infrastructure for its basic needs, like transportation and roads that are suitable for farm equipment, access to new technologies given the rise of e-commerce, smart devices, and other advanced technologies, processing, manufacturing, and aggregation facilities, and these are needed to assist farmers in preparing and delivering products to market, and continued technical assistance and funding, such as what is provided by the Soil Conservation District and by EDA. And we point out the existing programs, agencies, and organizations that support ag in the county, like Roving Radish and Soil Conservation District and EDA. So some of the policies and actions intended to support our ag industry in the future include promoting and supporting modern farming initiatives, including the development of commercial processing and kitchen facilities, continuing and expanding business development services to position ag enterprises for growth, innovation, diversification, improving opportunities for the growth of e-commerce and last-mile delivery infrastructure, and encouraging agricultural opportunities in the East to tap into opportunities for local food. We also have a policy to continue and enhance established technical and funding efforts to support the farming community, such as those provided by the Soil Conservation District and EDA, and a policy to support and encourage beginning farmers to build a diverse farming community. And this includes considering leasing county-owned land for startup agricultural businesses, considering a program to loan or share farm equipment, and enhancing availability and access to community gardens that can be used by beginning farmers. And then another slide of policies to reduce regulatory barriers to diversifying ag operations in both the West and the East, updating the zoning regulations to promote ag expansion and diversification, especially for on-farm processing and other agribusiness opportunities, working with stakeholders to review the zoning regulations to create more opportunities for agritourism, and reducing barriers to meet the burgeoning demand for on-farm breweries, wineries, distilleries, cideries, and meaderies. And finally, reviewing transportation planning and road development and maintenance standards to reduce transportation barriers to farming. So to wrap it all up for economic prosperity, we have some key takeaways. This chapter retains and expands the use of land for industrial purposes, supports the attraction and retention of jobs offering opportunities for a diverse workforce with a variety of skill and educational levels, seeks to attract workers and ensure that housing supply keeps pace with job growth, calls for monitoring economic trends like teleworking, e-commerce, and technological advancements like autonomous vehicles, emphasizes the need for increased job training, workforce development, and reliable broadband, and finally advocates for modern farming initiatives and infrastructure to allow agriculture to remain competitive in the county. And with that, we'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you so much. So we'll get started with our questions, and we'll begin with District 4's Ms. Deb Young.
Actually, I would like to ask Mr. Fitchett to join us at the table. Since you are our commercial developer of millions of square feet. Yeah. Oh, sorry. We haven't used these microphones in a while.
Buttons are better.
First of all, thank you for coming here this morning, and congratulations on your promotion at
Thank you.
Howard Hughes. Stay cool. That's all I have to say. It's a hot assignment coming up. I'd like to, I'm sure you haven't read this chapter 5, or maybe you have. Have you read it?
I looked at it last night. so
Okay, all right. Okay, no problem. I didn't know if you were familiar with some of the verbiage that's actually in there. But given how much commercial development you've done in the office arena, I thought you might be able to shed some light on some of these numbers. One of the, as you may or may not have seen, there, according to this chapter, 282,000 jobs could possibly occur at some point. We presently have 174,000 jobs, and that there is a demand for 59,000 jobs over the next 20 years. 3% of Howard County was set aside for commercial space, which was a total of 6.9 miles. Total commercial land, 10.1 million square feet, which includes that's what's left. And that includes 4.7 million square feet in downtown Columbia. So my first question is, how much of that square footage of the 4.7 million square footage has been built so far in downtown Columbia?
The commercial square footage that we've developed, and thanks for the opportunity to speak on this. And also thank you for the congratulations. And it really, I think, is timely, particularly with the general plan. And I know that Gateway is a focus of or will be a focus of the planning efforts, coming up in the next couple of years. And really, my new role is to it's nationwide. It'll be working on sort of large transformative initiatives in Howard Hughes' other regions, but also still here in Columbia. I get to stay here in Howard County, which is great, and working on the kind of transformative partnerships and initiatives that could be in the future for Gateway is exactly the kind of thing that I'll be working on for Howard Hughes here as well as in the other regions that we have opportunities. In fact, it's interesting, the timing of this. We just yesterday announced the attraction of a major research and development facility in one of our Houston master plan communities. We sold 77 acres to Chevron for a new research and development green energy facility that will be transformative for that master plan community. So that's the kind of thing that that I'll be working on and hope to be working on here with all of you and with our other stakeholders in the Gateway area as we work on the master plan for Gateway. Again, I think there's a huge opportunity there. We are the largest holder of undeveloped land in Gateway. We have 110 acres in Gateway. And I think there's just a tremendous opportunity there to accommodate some of the growth that's projected in the general plan. The fact that there's a projection of demand for 59,000 jobs in the next 20 years, but only land available for half of that, roughly, speaks to the importance of being able to, plan for and accommodate that growth in a way that's really effective for the county that's so it can grow in a sustainable way and grow in a way that will be effective for the revenues of the county and to continue to maintain the quality of life that we all enjoy, and I am happy to be able to continue to enjoy here in Howard County. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here and to speak to this. In terms of the numbers in downtown Columbia, so we've developed about 800,000 square feet of office space. We've got our 4th office building is currently under construction. That's the medical office building that'll be completing. We're actually having a topping out event for that in about a month. And we've planned, obviously, our next office building as well. We're recruiting for that. So when that building is going up, that'll get us to about 1 million square feet so far in downtown Columbia.
Okay, so do you have any idea how many employees are occupying or will occupy that 1 million square feet of commercial office space?
The kind of rule of thumb is somewhere between 200 to 250 square feet per employee. So if we, and we have about, there's over 1 million square feet of existing office space that we own in downtown Columbia that just is under Howard Hughes portfolio. So the existing that we have is about a little over 2 million square feet. If you divide that by 200, you would get 10,000, I think, employees. Somebody might want to check my math on that. I think I've got the orders of magnitude right, but so that would be about 10,000 employees within our office portfolio in downtown Columbia. There is, I got it right? Good. It was either 1,000 or 100,000, so I think 10,000 sounds about right. So, and there is other office space in downtown Columbia. There's also the mall, which is, the ratios that you would look at for a mall in terms of employment would probably be more on the order of maybe 400 to 500 square feet per employee. So the mall is, again, rough numbers, about 1.5 million square feet. So divide that by 500, and that would give you.
Well, this is what I was trying to figure out last night, but I was missing that critical number. And my math isn't good enough to, just like you, doing all of that in my head, trying to figure out if what's left of the 3.7 million potential of commercial space that you could build out, that Howard Hughes has the right to build out, whether that would bring on another 40,000 employees. I just don't even have I don't have a clue as to what, I mean, you mentioned that it was 250 square feet per employee.
Yeah, and again, these are rules of thumb.
Right,
But, 200
right.
to 250,000, or 200 to 250 square feet per employee. So if we built another 4 million square feet of commercial, that would translate to 20,000 jobs.
20, oh, good, that was good, okay. Okay, 20,000 jobs, which would be about a third of the jobs that are projected going right in downtown. Do you know if there are, so 1 million, let's just round it up. I know it's 800 and you've got another 200 coming, so of the million, do you know if that 250 square foot per employee has been playing out so far in the buildings that you have constructed?
It's, I think as we're all aware, it's definitely a time of transition in sort of the workplace and traditional office. There was a trend prior to COVID where that number was shrinking, so it was going down, from 200 to 150 to maybe even 100 square feet per employee in some cases. That trend seems to have somewhat reversed, but it's still, again, it's I think still to be determined, just because different employees and different industries are looking at their workplaces differently. There certainly is a big trend towards having more, looking at the office as a place where people are convening. There are certain jobs that people, do very easily from home and actually are better done from home. And then there are other things that are much better done in the office. So there's, if you are, working in if you're trying to do something that requires creativity and collaboration, that's much better done in person. If you are looking, if you're a younger employee and you're trying to learn your job or learn your skill, that's much better done in person. Whereas sort of day-to-day tasks can, that are more sort of routine, a lot of job functions can be done very effectively remotely and actually more efficiently because people don't have to commute back and forth to work. So it allows for flexibility for employees. So all those things are still evolving. We've learned a lot in the last couple of years since the pandemic hit, but we still are learning. So where exactly that number is going to shake out in the future, I think it's hard to tell. But if I was going to pick a number, I think I would stick with 200 for now.
200 square feet per employee?
Yes.
As an average?
Yep.
As opposed to 250, which it used to be pre-COVID. But you saw it shrinking before COVID a
there was
little
a
bit.
trend,
Yeah.
reduction.
The trend was downwards, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've also spent quite a bit of time in the last couple of weeks talking to various commercial developers about lending. And one of the things that I've also heard as a trend is that banks are very wary right now of lending for building out more commercial space, given the trends that you've just discussed. And I'm wondering if in your experience, or the experience of Howard Hughes in general, not just here in Columbia, but around the country, if you're finding that that's also the case.
Yes, that is very much the case right now. Banks are very reluctant generally to lend on commercial product. I would, that I see as a short-term trend. I don't think that is a long-term trend. I don't think that would necessarily factor very meaningfully into something like a general plan that's got a 20-year horizon. Banks are in the business of lending, and they will, once again, at some point, open back up and want to lend for commercial office space. But today, because of the rise in interest rates, the effect that that has on both office building valuations as well as loan-to-value ratios, there's just a lot of factors that are sort of combining right now that banks generally are hesitant to provide new office loans. But again, I see that as a short-term trend. Is that a 12-month trend or a 24-month trend? I'm not sure, but eventually I think that will normalize.
Okay, my last question for this round is Transportation Demand Management Plan. I know that Howard Hughes is responsible for creating a Transportation Demand Management Plan, and
Actually, it's the Downtown Columbia Partnership. It's not our responsibility.
sorry, the Downtown Columbia Partnership. Should we have had Philip Dodge here?
If you want to focus on the TDM, then I would say yes.
Is he here?
Well, we could save that for the transportation and be sure to invite him, if that would help.
Haven't we done transportation?
Nope, transportation is next and last, before amendments.
Okay, it seems like we've done it. Okay, then let me just ask, seems like I've done it all, so I guess. Let me ask you this. Greg, Mr. Fitchett, do you have any feel whatsoever about the percentage of people who live in the residences that Howard Hughes has built in downtown Columbia, who work in any of the who could walk to any of the buildings that have been built in downtown Columbia?
I can give you a great anecdote, which is that we have about 50 people in our office, and 4 of them live in our apartments. So that's just under 10%. I can't say they walk to work every day. They probably didn't walk to work today because it's a little warm. But they do have the ability. They are within walking distance. So again, that's one anecdote. But in our office, I guess that's about 8% of our workforce lives within walking distance of where they work.
But you don't have any feel for like how many people who work for Tenable might live in the area, or how many people work for, what's the other big building on the corner of?
MedStar.
MedStar. Do you have any idea how many MedStar employees might live in the residences?
Other than anecdotally, I do know, I see, sometimes that, many of the employees who work in, or who live in our buildings, live in our apartment buildings, do work at the employers that we have downtown, but I don't have a specific number. That may be part of I believe that the partnership is working to update the Transportation Demand Management Plan. That may be part of the study that they're doing, but Philip would be a better person to ask.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Youngman?
Talking about the opportunities for more industrial, not on Route 1, heading out Route 70. And we see that all, as soon as you leave Howard County, we see it. It looks like one of the barriers, though, is that most of those parcels around those interchanges are developed. They're not developed to their potential. They're underdeveloped, whatever it might be, but there's stuff there already. How do you, it's similar to the problem we have on Route 1. I mean, parcels are bigger, but there's stuff there. How do you take those interchanges and what's there and try to, develop it industrial?
Well,
And a lot of them aren't flat. It's just, it looks like a frustrating situation because on a map, you should be like, oh, that's great, but it just,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
I mean, just speaking to what we discuss in the plan, now this came out of our Planning Advisory Committee. So there were some committee members who said, well, we should really ensure that there are opportunities for industrial development along the I-70 corridor. However, they recognized that in this particular part of 70 where they were thinking, as where they identified these potential opportunities, they said, well, it's on well and septic, so we have to just make sure that whatever industrial uses are there can operate on well and septic. And there are some of those
But like
types
a
of
last
industries
mile,
that do.
you basically need bathrooms. I mean, a last mile isn't building anything, right? And that'd be great to put that stuff there, but what do you do with what's there?
Right. Well, I guess I'd have to, go back to see, so what we ended up doing though, as it pertains to the general plan, is we just said, well, along Route 70, we don't have a specific industrial character area along Route 70, but we just said when we get into the zoning regulation update, we should ensure that there are opportunities for context-sensitive industrial development. So I don't think we're envisioning, say, M1, M2 out there. We're envisioning still opportunities for industrial uses. Now, what do you do with actual land that already has stuff on it? I mean, I think that just depends on the individual property owner. So much of what happens with zoning is, well, we try to create opportunities through zoning regulations, but then it's up to the individual property owner to decide to redevelop, use their land in a way that now zoning regulations may allow them to do, or sell their land.
Because you'll be limited in a lot of cases to the interchanges themselves, because you can't drive big trucks on Old Frederick Road and Frederick Road. All those east-west corridors are state highway. So, it's basically got to be in the four corners of those interchanges. Okay. I mean, I do think there's a lot of opportunity there. It's just every time I think about it and I look around, I'm like, there's stuff here already. So what do you do? Redevelopment.
Yeah, but like I said, it's just creating the opportunities through the zoning regulations, and the private property owners have to be willing to want to do what the new zoning regulations are allowing them to do.
Thanks.
Ms. Walsh?
Thanks. I wanted to ask some of the other guests that I think that we have today from Abrams Development, COPT, Oracle, to share with us their perspective, similar to what Mr. Fitch had shared for Howard Hughes, just what your role was in terms of developing particularly this economic prosperity chapter, and how you foresee the office and commercial market in the next 10 or 15 years that is the subject of this document. I have on my list Matt Abrams and Peter Matheson from Abrams, Ann Mead, Krista Herring, Thomas Foz from COPT, and Kate McManus from Oracle. Oracle's a gateway, right?
We could probably get two people right here.
What? Anyone else? All right.
I can't believe I went first and nobody followed
No
me.
one's just next to me.
I looked around, nobody was coming.
Yes, I don't know why lawyers and auditors sit in the table. Kindly. Comma kindly. And I also understand we have Tom Valentine from NIOP on the phone, so, just have, is that not, did I make that up? No. What a setup. Okay, well then, I think we have plenty of voices to hear from, so please, if you would introduce yourself.
Absolutely.
And then, can everyone hear me? Yes.
No, turn, hit the green, so it's green.
I got you. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm Krista Herring with COPT. I'm Vice President of Asset Management and Leasing. I oversee our Columbia Gateway portfolio on a leasing and asset management front. We own approximately 2.3 million square feet of built office space there, 28 existing buildings, and then we have about 19 acres of undeveloped land where we could build currently about 300,000 square feet of additional office space, abutting 95. And then COPT, for those who don't know, we're a publicly traded REIT. We are about to celebrate our 25th anniversary. We've owned in Columbia Gateway for about 25 years, and we're headquartered there. We've been headquartered in Columbia Gateway, right on Columbia Gateway Drive, for 17 years. So this is our home, our backyard. We care deeply about what happens there today, and certainly long term. We've been happy to, first of all, very thankful to be invited and work with the planning staff to submit our comments along the way. It's been a wonderful process, and we just appreciate being engaged.
throughout the process, so thank you for that. We did submit testimony recently in support of the plan. We're so excited to see the focus on the Gateway District. We totally agree. You know, there's wonderful untapped potential there. It's a thriving park today, but there's so much more that we could do together long term. We look forward to working with you all and the other stakeholders on development of the master plan going forward, and are eager to get started.
As to the issue of office space, though, how, you know, a lot of the data in here, at least in this chapter, relates to pre-COVID times, particularly in terms of office retail projections. And I wondered what your industry is doing differently since COVID, and seeing how your tenants are using those spaces, how you have adjusted both, you know, present day operations and planning for, again, this term that is concurrent with our general plan document, the 10 to 15 year.
Great question. I'll keep going since we probably have a little different perspective on this. But so COPT, we're strategic in terms of catering to the DoD and contractors. Over 90% of our revenue is derived from those uses. We're strategically located around defense installations for the most part. What we've seen, you know, through COVID and into today is really that so many of our tenants, the majority of our tenants, are coming to the office. Many of them have SCIF spaces, secure spaces, you know, really specialized facilities where there could be classified work being done, and they can't take that work home. So it's been, you know, great, obviously, as a landlord catering to that industry, that we've had such robust demand and have even grown throughout, you know, the last 3 years in developing new office buildings outside of Howard County, but responding to demand where we see it. But we're hearing from all of our tenants, and I think one of our tenants was here to testify in the last round, Intelligent, and they're a mid-sized government contractor, cybersecurity provider, and they summed it up really well. You know, they have people coming to the office, and though they need to be there, they want people to want to be there. There are still, you know, workplace initiatives, culture building that is really important that has to be done on premises. So we've listened to that over time. What we've done really over the last 5 or 6 years is kind of this incremental activation where we've taken leasable space or common area space on the first floors of our building, sacrificed, you know, revenue producing suites to create tenant amenity spaces. So we've made a really significant investment in kind of creating those outsized amenity spaces that cater to all of these demands for our tenants. So those spaces include things like tenant lounges, large conference facilities, community kitchens with free coffee and cold brew on tap, game areas, yoga lawns, pickleball courts. You know, we're really just trying to get creative in terms of our on-site activations to keep our tenants happy and excited to come to work. So that's been a really successful program for us. Obviously, it's capital intensive, and it's done well, but you know, long term there needs to be more. So we're excited to work with everyone to develop this kind of mixed use plan and master plan for Gateway.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kate McManus. I'm the building site manager for Oracle Corporation. And we also are excited about opening up our building. We've opened up our building since we've returned from COVID for breakfast and lunch to the Gateway community, and also outside. We have people from Apple Ford that come over and get breakfast and take it away. And we welcome that because we are a Fitwel certified building, which means that we concentrate on the amenities for our tenants. Fitwel is very stringent. It's kind of like BOMA 360 for those of you that are familiar with that certification, except instead of concentrating on the mechanical and electrical systems, it concentrates on daylight and desks that move up and down and ergonomics and all of that good stuff. So Oracle's very committed to that, as well as sustainability. We have 2 tenants in the building. One is a private tenant. The other one is the Howard County Police Department. And we work with them constantly. They have trainings there. They do all kinds of good work. We had crossing guard certification training last week before school started. So we really open up our building to the community as well. As far as people coming back to work, we used to have an average number of about 525. Today, we have about 50 Oracle employees that come in. So unfortunately, we have had to downsize our space and put more space on the market, which obviously is in competition to, you know, Copt and other private owners of the Gateway. But one of the biggest complaints that we do get from our tenants and our employees when we were in the building was there's nothing going on. It's kind of off the beaten track. There's not a huge, there's no retail back there. They've got Rudy's, there's a Dunkin' Donuts now, but it is very little to serve as many buildings in the community that's back there. So we have a Gateway Association meeting where we discuss these things and try and build additional community, because we at Oracle feel that the community is very, very important to people being happy at work and coming into the office. So, you know, I mean, our building has pretty much everything. It has a fitness center, it has a cafe, it has beautiful dining, it has outdoor seating, it's got, you know, but people still aren't coming in. So we have to really fight to figure out ways to come in. So that's our challenge. And our building is about 250,000 square feet. It's 13 acres. And yeah. We also have a building over, we rent it through Copt, over at Annapolis Junction. And that's a total SCIF site. We have the largest SCIF of any Oracle building in the country. So, you know, we partner with Copt on both sides, so it's a good relationship, I think.
How does the Annapolis Junction vacancy or occupancy compare to a Gateway? I mean, because you do have amenities there, or at least more than you do in Gateway, or?
We have never shut down that office.
Okay.
And Copt over there is a little bit different. They have quarterly tenant meetings where everybody comes, and they offer and they offer catering, and that, you know, they build community over there. But because it's a SCIF.
Oh, right, okay.
And so many people have to be physically in the SCIF, we only have a population of 52, and about 48 come in a day.
Okay. All right, but is there anyone else who joined us in response to our request to hear from commercial landlords, developers that would like to be heard? Yeah. And then, sorry, I'm not sure who's on.
That's Matt Abrams.
Oh, okay.
I'm Matt Abrams.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Abrams, for people online, they can only hear us if we're speaking into the microphones. And this is a pretty essential question, I think, to this entire chapter. So I really want to make sure that we hear from everybody. And it looks like Mr. Matheson would also like to make some remarks. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm here with my colleague Peter Matheson, who is joining us here virtually. We have about a 1.5 million square feet of office space in Columbia Gateway. We've been in Howard County for 20 or 25 years. The majority of our commercial real estate space is here in Howard County. We have a couple properties outside, but I think 60 or 70% of our space is here in Howard County, so we are very committed to the prosperity of Howard County. Getting directly to your question about how the office space is used, it's a little bit difficult to say. Coming out of the pandemic, we're still, you know, if you see the recent spike, we're still kind of dealing with it. It's hard to say we're out of the pandemic, but overall, we would echo what we read in the economic prosperity chapter, that hybrid definitely seems to be the dominating new trend in the workforce. Remote work, like Mr. Fitchett said, it works for some people, but it definitely doesn't work for everyone. So overall, especially this week in particular, since schools have come back in session, we definitely see a pickup of people coming back to the office.
Is there anyone online who'd like to make comments regarding commercial space and development?
I would like to point out that in 2022, it was one of our best leasing years ever. And we're seeing the continued demand for office space in Howard County continue into 2023 as well. The portfolio is approximately 90% leased at the current time.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Because that's the nuance that I think I've heard in some preparing conversations is 90% leased, but what percent occupied?
Yes, so that is very difficult to put an actual number on without going to each parking lot every day and counting the number of cars. There's a website called Placer.ai, which can give you kind of an idea. It's a paid website, so can't just anyone can't go on there. But if you look at it, it looks like, we got down to maybe 25 to 50% occupancy at the worst of the pandemic, and now we're probably back to, of the spaces that are leased, about 60 to 75% of the people are coming in at least one day a week. Would you?
There is no doubt that we're going through a transition, and that transition will probably continue for the foreseeable future. We are encouraged by the fact that we have new tenants looking for new space at the same time as we have tenants right-sizing their space requirements.
I'll just keep going until you shut me down.
I think that it's a pretty, I think you're surfacing a lot of pretty essential points here. So if you want to continue on this line of questioning for a few more minutes, a quick time check. We have about 30 minutes left for this chapter before we shift to Route 1.
Okay. All right, so, and I think my statement will just be a summary, and everyone who's spoken before can say yay or nay. And I'm still not sure, did we get everyone up here who wanted to speak on this subject? Yes? Okay. Is then whether you're worried. I mean, I think, Mr. Matheson, what you just basically described to me is, yes, as the leases come up for renewal, you expect your existing tenants perhaps to downsize to accommodate the numbers of persons that are coming in on a day-by-day basis. But you, at least in your experience, are still seeing new tenants come in and fill that space. So you're not perhaps veering from these projections and building plans that existed pre-COVID because you still see a healthy demand for whatever space may become occupiable in the future.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. All right, I'll leave it.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Walsh. I really appreciate. Dr. Jones?
Good morning again, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone who's here today. I just wanted to take a moment, not to try to double up on what anyone else said, but I really think that I'm excited. Gateway, I think, is going to be amazing. But I do believe that when I talk to, given the line of work that I do and some of my colleagues, there are times when I think people want to come here for work and they do so remotely for a short period of time, given different business partners that they have. It would be great to see more spaces to lease temporary office space. So like there's these, I know in New York and in Denver, they have these, I forget the name of the companies, but they have these spaces where you can just go set up shop for like 2 days or a week or a month, handle business in person, and then everyone disperses back to wherever they are in the country or in the world. I don't know if Howard County has too many of those, so it'd be great to see more of those. And then, but on the same token, if people were to come here for work, it would be great to fly into BWI, Uber to Gateway or somewhere in Howard County, and not need to drive anywhere else for a week or two. So the grocery stores, entertainment, restaurants, bars, different things that people want to do while they're here working temporarily. It would be great to have more centralized locations like that, as was mentioned earlier. I'm excited about the plan. Thank you so much for all that you do. I don't have any specific questions. I just wanted to let you all know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I wanted to just follow up on some of the shared parking districts because I think it's essential to how we better use our land, but there are also some challenges that I think have existed in implementing shared parking districts. So I think, Mr. Fitchett, you're probably the most familiar with shared parking districts in Howard County. But also, I would like to hear from the HOCO by Design team, sort of how we're approaching that, both for, when we're looking at our economic development, how are we making sure, how are we weaving them together so that way we're utilizing parking well and allowing that land to be used for more economic development? Or would you like me to save that for transportation?
I think, what do we cover in? Okay, yeah, we think it would be great if, once Office of Transportation were here, who could answer that question.
Okay, well then mark your calendar for, for the transportation. That is fine. Then I guess I'll turn to EDA. Mr. Gennady or Ms. Jones, the question is really, every time we talk about expanding our commercial base, it requires a lot of effort for a small amount of growth when we're talking about these percentages. So if you could touch on sort of the things that, how you participated in the creation of the plan, the elements within the chapters that you see will provide the most support for growing our commercial base. I think the council is unified in its importance of commercial base, but how we get there and how we actually expand it and what things on the government side that we need to do, it would really be great to hear from y'all.
Yeah, thank you for the chance to be here. And also, I just want to say welcome to Jen, new CEO. It's great, a lot of great energy, and it's appreciated. I think in terms of commercial base, at least from my perspective, I think we've tried to act as an orchestrator with the private market, with the public sector, and just really try to bring people together. Not that we have all the answers of how to do it, but just get that dialogue going so that as we get into the planning, we can have reasonable assumptions, reasonable debates, and then kind of make decisions, knowing we're not going to be perfect, but we're working through it as stakeholders.
And then,
yeah, please.
yeah, and then also, a lot of what we've been doing is, providing support to the businesses that are here so they can expand, right? So we have several businesses that have used our resources, our loan programs, making sure that we have offered them technical assistance, and they've expanded the space that they are in now, which increases the commercial base. And I also think that a lot of our programs are focused on developing the entrepreneurial pipeline. So we want people here, a lot of record numbers of people started businesses during the pandemic. How are we supporting them? What can we do to make sure that they thrive? A lot of these businesses, we all know, like 67%, 70% fail in the first 5 years. We want to make sure that they thrive. What we do is we provide resources at EDA, and then some of these companies are incubator companies in this space, and they graduate out into Howard County into like brick and mortar spaces. And so I think doing those two things, helping companies that are here expand, and then providing entrepreneurial support is helping with the commercial base. And obviously, as we've all know, we don't have a lot of land available to attract these big companies, but I do believe that there is a play for companies that maybe need office space in a downtown area but don't want to be in an urban core, right? So we have Baltimore and Washington. They're great, but some people don't want to be located there, but Howard County presents a great opportunity. It's right in the middle of those two markets. It's close to 95, and downtown Columbia, for instance, has a city feel to it and has activation spaces that attract workforce, right? So, reaching out to and engaging with, like Jason said, other people that are maybe looking to come here and maybe would like office space around a mall or by the lake or downtown Columbia. So I think those three things are ways that we can kind of increase commercialization in Howard County.
I just have one follow-up, but just sort of along the assemblage line, which I'll save for Route 1, but when Mr. Young was talking about 70, that was one of the things that I kept wondering about, because we're in this redevelopment phase. We're ending, many things are happening, right? We're leaving the industrial age, we're entering whatever we are in now. We are, as a county, we are leaving the greenfield development and really entering redevelopment. And so it's going to take us looking at how we interact with businesses, how we interact with land, how we move people, goods, and services very differently. So when it comes to kind of getting people to the right places in the county how do you guys see your role with assemblage and really help relocating businesses to the right places to allow the plan to really expand and thrive?
Well, so part of one of our main resources is helping businesses find space. So that's like, our business development team, that's one of their core functions. And so we have engaged, we have good relationships with brokers, with owners of property. We also have, on the business side, have good relationships with businesses. So when we're there just serving businesses in our normal day, weekly activities, we hear, we support them when they say they need a new space or we want to move into a different space. That's basically our function. I mean, that's what we do. We help with permitting. We help find the space and engage them with the landlords. So that's kind of like one of our core functions that we do routinely already.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ms. Young?
So I think we all know that there's lots of empty commercial space right now, commercial office space. And I guess this whole plan just seems odd to me that we would be looking at all these different ways to build more commercial space when it seems to me like what we should really be doing is trying to find ways to help the owners of commercial space fill their buildings. So before we start building more new commercial space, and that doesn't include, I guess, Howard Hughes over there because there's already plans for that commercial space. And I know that Howard Hughes has been very thoughtful about ensuring that they have a tenant before they start building their new commercial space. But here we've got a plan that says, oh, we have 10.1 million square feet left. We need an extra 6 million of commercial square footage, and we've got landlords here, developers here, who don't have filled buildings. So I guess I'm at a loss somewhat to understand why there's a push in this general plan. We are in 2023. I realize the general plan started being written in 2020, which was the beginning of COVID. And we didn't know how all of this was going to happen. But I think we need to update this general plan in this chapter to talk about ways in which we can assist our commercial developers in filling their space. I have a question for you all on the panel. Do any of you know how much empty commercial space there is in Maple Lawn? Have any of you checked that out? None of you? Okay, so you don't know. And I imagine that there is empty commercial space there as well, but maybe not. I don't know. And do any of you know whether or not the transportation demand management plan for Maple Lawn has been fulfilled and has been filed as a report? You don't. Okay. Do any of you know if what the percentage of people are who live in Maple Lawn who might be walking to commercial businesses or any business in that area? You don't. Okay. There's a lot of assumptions in this chapter about live, walk, play, about commercial, about wanting to have more commercial buildings, more commercial square footage. And my view of all of this, frankly, is help the people who are here in this room now, including some people who are not, fill the buildings that are not filled. And then I would like to bring Kate McManus back up here. I have some more questions for you. Actually, Mr. Giannotti, if you could stay here, because this question involves you too, because I think this is important. You mentioned, Ms. McManus, that, no, this is not the principal's office. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here, actually, because there's been a lot of discussion, particularly on Route 1, which is coming up, that we can't build retail on Route 1, even though there's thousands, tens of thousands of people who now live there, that it's just not successful. And so a zoning regulation amendment was passed 3 years ago that actually allows the developers on Route 1 who develop residential not to build any retail in their buildings. And you talked about how people at the Oracle building, one of the reasons why they don't really like coming in is because there's nothing to do. And everybody on this council, I'm sure, has taken the loop on Robert Fulton, okay? We all are well aware of that. And to be honest, every time I take that loop, I say to myself, why the heck aren't there some more good delis out here? Look at all these thousands of people who work here. Mr. Giannotti has been working very hard to try and activate the space along this area in Gateway and create something that would be more interesting, I would hope, to the people in Gateway. But first I want to ask you, why do you think there hasn't been an ability or success in attracting some of these, and I don't know you, I'm sorry, I forgot your name from COPT because you're nodding too, so you look like you might have something to add to this. Yes. Do you have something to add to this too? Okay, come on up. Come on up. And let's just, yeah, the price is right. If we could just start with Ms. McManus and then I want to get the thoughts of all three of you about why we have not been successful in doing this, why developers on Route 1 might say, well, there's no way we can do retail, nobody wants to go. How can we, with what we have right now, because let's just assume Gateway development may not even start for another 10 years. Okay, so let's just, if we make that assumption, what can we, it's okay, Jason, okay. I saw you put your hand on your heart, okay.
Did he just whimper a little bit?
He did, he whimpered a little bit, yeah. What can we do today? How can we help you today? And by the way, one more thing for COP, congratulations on your 25th anniversary, your rebranding. Thank you for bringing all of those DOD people to Howard County, keeping them here, that huge percentage of people who are coming back into the office every day. That's a wonderful thing, and it's a huge way to support our commercial market. So yay for you guys. All right, so
first, I think that the reason people aren't coming back in is their managers aren't coming back in. And so if it doesn't start at the top, why would you come in? You come in to have a conversation, to collaborate, but if your manager's always on Zoom, what's the point of coming in? So that's what we're having a real hard time, getting people to come in. As Jason was saying, it's a hybrid work environment, and that looks like what it's going to stay for a while. So we encourage managers to come in so that their employees will come in. I have not worked very long in the Gateway. I have worked for Oracle for 6 years. And before that, I worked for University of Maryland downtown at UMB. It seems like at 5 o'clock, it's the same thing. The sidewalks roll up downtown, they roll up in the Gateway. The one nice restaurant that people would take clients and that type of thing closed down, AIDA. So now, now who's holding their heart? Yeah. So there's people come in, they have their clients come in. We have people that come in from all over the world to come to meetings in our building. Our building used to be Micros, and then Oracle bought Micros in 2014. So Micros was very established, and Oracle came in, renovated the space. So our space is beautiful. We are looking for suggestions on how to get people to come in, on how to motivate and what people want to do. That's why Nikki Abrams and COPT put together the Gateway Association so that we could do events in the Gateway for people to interact and collaborate and know each other from down the street. Before COVID, there was discussions of getting scooters so people could ride to AIDA. So all of these ideas were percolating. And then COVID hit, and everything went down, and now the population is down. And like you say, people don't want to spend money on low participation and the scare of opening something up when there's so few people coming into the office. So it's kind of, is it the tail wagging the dog, the cart before the horse? I don't know. But, you know, we do have a lot of open space. There is a lot of open space.
All right. Mr. Giannotti, you get a chance to say how one of your big idea.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I think from our standpoint, there has been success. I think, you know, yes, COVID happened. It has a everlasting effect in a lot of ways. But I think when we did start organizing and spending time together, I mean, I think the Taste the Gateway events showed there's almost a potency for people in the park pre-COVID that were there that wanted to get together. And I think what we found is that when we had those attempts to bring the community together, it really did thrive. What does it look like now on the other side, and we'll call it the new normal, of how many people are coming back to the space? You know, I don't know how to call that, but what I do think is that the stakeholders in Gateway, you know, you made a point earlier about how do we help the people who are here now. And I think that them coming together and their contributions in this general plan is them sharing that with you. I mean, we really, like I said, facilitated. So I think that's, you know, I think the ability to redevelop in unique ways that meets the market, that respects the resources, that enhances infrastructure, I think that's where that community can take it. But I can't sit here and answer you what that looks like today, because that's, I'm more of a coordinator than a big idea.
Would you want to talk about I'm trying to talk about activating spaces that are here now.
Yeah.
And I know that you've been working on something to activate the space that's here now, but maybe you don't want to talk about it, which is fine.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, I saw you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen.
Well, I would, just
Yeah.
a time check, that we only have about 10 minutes left, and I really, I'm guessing Mr. Ingman's probably going to touch on agritourism, potentially, and then I'm sure Ms. Walsh has additional. So just if you can share, but also be brief.
Yeah, listen, I think, you know, I grew up here in Columbia. I went to Oakland Mills, just for some background of, you know, I'm of this place. And I think how we're connected now means more than ever. And so I think that, like, my take on economic development in my shorter time here has been when you can put activating kind of like infrastructure in place, it will unlock the potential around it. And, you know, we have a non-used CSX rail corridor that connects to the Savage Mark Station, or Camden line, I'm sorry. And, you know, we have a real chance at redeveloping that corridor so that it can connect almost every end of Columbia and parts of Howard County to a core that can be redeveloped with the right vision, with being Gateway. So, you know, I see it as civic infrastructure. It's kind of like as I've whiteboarded and thought through it. And I think it'll be one of the most important and also toughest redevelopments I think the county could undertake. So I think it's meaningful. You know, my question to myself and, you know, to my kids who really have motivated me to do this is, what's the value of connecting Columbia to DC and Baltimore with no car? So, you know, there's other factors, other parameters, there's real constraints, but I think that's a discussion that we as a county can have and can be successful with.
Can you just share a couple thoughts, Marissa, to add to that? How can we get some good delis?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think number one, and I know this, it feels like near-term activation, but it's a heavy lift, is improving transportation into the park to access the amenities that surround Columbia Gateway today. You know, I think in a 1.5 mile radius, there's over 80 options, from Starbucks to big box to every grocery store you could want. You know, I'm a working mom with 2 toddlers, and my 30-minute, you know, lunch break is like where I get all my errands done. And so it's a great location, but getting there it's challenging. And I think unlocking that, you know, 108 connection is, we see low-hanging fruit, recognizing it's not, you know, it's more complicated than it seems, but that's really a high priority for us in terms of getting our tenants access to what's there, and then in turn, you know, improving the sort of the value proposition for new entrants to the market, new delis, new retailers that say, oh, look, Gateway is accessible for others in the community, not just those who work here.
Thank all of you for your great ideas, and I'm happy to work with any of you, and EDA, and our new leader, Ms. Jones, to see that some of these things get put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Youngman?
I'm not going to talk about agritourism because everybody knows we need it. Everybody knows we need to get things out of the way of it, and I don't think it's super controversial. I did want to ask, and I know it's funny, tourism and rec and parks aren't here, but you guys have been coordinating all this. During all of these discussions, did the need for a commercial athletic facility ever come up?
Yeah, first I'll answer this question, your first question. No, not to my recollection. Whether or not that's in the Land Preservation Parks and Recreation Plan, I don't know. We'd have to certainly ask the Department of Rec and Park.
The reason why I ask is we've got local businesses here that run tournaments, and we've got hotels, and and hotels don't need a ton of space. And for all of us that have kids that have gone through their teenage years, this is huge dollars. But like everything else, we talk about not enough land, they take up some space, and we don't have enough space because we can't have those paid tournaments coming in, kicking off the local leagues and like the taxpayers' kids off their fields. Okay. It's something that I think that deserves a mention in the general plan, and we'll talk to you a little bit about that. Because it is it would create some economic prosperity for some businesses.
And if I could just revisit your previous question, I think there's a second part to that answer. Beyond creating opportunities through zoning regulations to allow industrial uses, there are also other incentives that we could offer, and we're going to talk about those when we get into the Route 1 chapter. So there are incentives such as tax credit or tax abatement that can be used to try to incentivize the types of uses that we may want to see on particular properties. So there are some incentives that we can offer that might encourage the type of development you might want to see, especially in places where there's already stuff on the ground.
Now, on those industrial properties, though, the tough thing is some industrial uses don't create the number of jobs per like square footage of footprint that those buildings need, because a lot of that stuff's automated now. Are there models where, obviously you need the warehouse space on the ground level because trucks need to pull up and get stuff out, but we have a lot of this like retail ground level with stuff above it, but are there models with sort of warehouse, flex space, ground level, and then stuff above it out there?
Yeah, so actually we have done some initial research to see where there are some what we would consider industrial mixed-use redevelopments out there throughout the country. I think there are some successful models in places like Richmond, specifically Scott's Addition. Also, there are some successful industrial mixed-use areas around the Beltline in Atlanta, Georgia. And then we even saw an actual, when we had an intern, he found this redevelopment in Vancouver that had flex space, kind of ground floor flex space, light industrial uses mixed with a residential building. It was about 350 units or so.
Because a lot of the 7 or 8, on your mixed-use slide, even taking residential out, I need to get a better imagination to imagine that, but, like indoor athletic facilities and things like that, like, who cares if it's on top of a warehouse? That seems to be, like, indoor athletic facilities, another thing. Like, do you really want to take up that footprint that we kind of need for, a couple jobs? It's just not a big job generator. But this is probably a little bit also on the Route 1 discussion, because I imagine we'll get back into this, so that's all I got.
All right, Ms. Walsh.
I just have one comment and follow-up to our discussion before about adding the tenant amenities. Mr. Abrams mentioned it first about people coming back into the office now, school's in. And then Ms. Herring, you said that, you have the 2 toddlers. I would think childcare on site or in a uniform place I mean, that's what every parent of small children worries about. That is actually all that we worry about. So if you take that worry off my plate, I am much more likely to be sitting at my desk very happy after I drop them off at 9 o'clock or 8:30 or whatever the time is. That would be my comment on that discussion. That 100%, that's what I would be looking to do. My other question, though, and I agree with what you're saying, Deb, and that's why I asked, for a lot of these commercial developers and landlords to be here is that I'm worried about office space and vacancy and how we're planning for the future. I'm worried about retail, and I assume we'll talk more about that on Route 1. I mean, just driving down to Gopher Park High School opening, like lots of vacancy for lease signs in those windows. This is the council that excused the mixed-use activity centers from actually providing any commercial space along Route 1. And I know less about Maple Lawn, but you're right. Last time I was there, I also was like, what's going on here? That is worrisome, and it's something that I would think we would be more fulsomely addressing in this general plan. Another omission that I see here is, did I miss the discussion about the future of the mall? I mean, that's a huge landmass, right, in the middle of downtown Columbia, and it doesn't seem to me to be particularly thriving. We're now telling children they can't go there at night. That's what's going to be the mall for the next 10 years?
So the mall is actually captured under the Downtown Columbia plan, which is still going to carry forward as part of this general plan. So that is within the general plan as it exists right now for the continued redevelopment of the mall area.
Including the actual footprint of, the old mall?
My understanding of the Downtown Columbia plan is it's mostly infill around the mall and then select improvements to the mall structure. But obviously that is, it's a privately held commercial sense, so it's what they want to invest in as well.
Okay. I mean, I think in very vivid terms, and so right now I see a giant crater there, and yes, a lot of really pretty stuff along the outside, but to me that's a really gaping hole in this plan.
Yeah, I would say that it has been very recently and more robustly discussed as part of the Downtown Columbia plan, which is the general plan for that area. Yeah.
Okay. All right, and then I have one other comment.
Madam Chair, on the topic you had about the office, I was thinking about it before and I didn't write it down. It would be helpful. Our vacancy rates aren't high because people that aren't occupying their space are still leasing their space.
Yeah.
And so there's got to be some model out there that would help all of us, would help inform EDA and us and you guys as private owners of what are people seeing as those leases burn off and tenants come to the landlord and say, okay, we want to be here. You've given us a pickleball court and we're happy, but we don't need 4 floors anymore. We need 2. And I don't have any analysis on that. And I think it's kind of where we were all kind of going. And that data would probably help inform a lot of us here in the room if it exists. So, thank you.
Can I say the third thing I'm worried about in here? Yes. All right. I think we all agree we want to expand. Well, I think the language in here is preserve or retain industrial land use, right? But if you look at the map, 5-4, and I interpret those shadings correctly, it looks like we're actually deleting a significant mass of industrial land use, and I'm pretty sure that that's the Gateway Complex. I would have liked to have seen, given that we want to, I think, also preserve, retain, and perhaps expand agricultural use, a similar map to 5-4 for agricultural purposes, right? I mean, I love the policy that says expanded in the east, but I don't see that articulated anywhere. So the map that's in there is deleting industrial space, and there's not a corresponding one for agriculture, because I 100% agree. We all should be preserving and ideally expanding upon that potential profit center and use of land.
Even if it's just shading Kathy Hudson's farm and Gorman Farm CSA, which I think are the only 2 farms I can think of that are outside farms. I think that there's an indoor farm potentially coming to Gateway that had looked at it, but Ms. Johnson, do you want to come up?
Just no, not particularly.
Just quickly, if I can speak to our land use database. So that's what informs a lot of these industrial character areas, current zoning and our existing land use. Our land use database does not have an agricultural land designation. We also don't have an agricultural land zoning district. So trying to map where actual farms are, we don't really have the data to do that. What we do map, which we do have already elsewhere in this plan, are the land that has been preserved through the Ag Land Preservation Program or through the MALF. So we do have those resources. I mean, we can see through our land use database if there are large swaths of land that appear to potentially be used for agricultural purposes. I mean, we know where some farms are, but we can't say that we know for sure that this, and this is the best location for farming, if that's helpful at all.
And there's a horse farm near to Gorman.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So there are a couple other farms throughout that area that, and as well as the community group that took over a farm. And they just bought another farm, I believe, or we're looking at buying another farm. So there is an expansion of agriculture in the east. I've also been working with Rec and Parks to see land that they own in the east to start an urban agriculture program for small farms who are looking for an acre to 5 acres, or even a half acre to 5 acres. That's larger than what we have for the community gardens, but would give them the opportunity to grow. So we're trying to identify those parcels that would work best for that.
Have you, sorry, do you mind? No. Sorry, the last follow-up. Have you worked with any, or is there any thought given to working with faith communities on some of their parcels to allow some smaller ag uses?
Actually, some of that is being done now with certain organizations that wanted to grow food that have come here from other countries. I've been working with them the last couple years to grow theirs and help them find more land as they continue to grow as they continue to expand their growing area, and they're looking for more areas to grow close to Columbia so that they're not driving cars. They don't drive a lot, so they want to stay close to their community.
Does that include our local Chin population?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then, Councilmember Walsh, I wanted to answer your question about industrial in the Gateway area, is that the Gateway Master Planning process is going to have a deep dive into the appropriate mix of uses, but we do plan to retain industrial within Gateway. It's just at what proportion is appropriate for with the market conditions. So it is not being eliminated on the map. It's very finely hashed gray showing the current zoning, but that master planning process will continue, and that will be evaluated more specifically as part of that.
So 5-4 shows four colorations. One is white. And, right, so I interpreted the solid colors to be what was proposed in this document, and I was interpreting the hash mark as being what is the current existing zoning.
It is the currently existing zoning. And then if you look at the technical focus area appendix that describes Gateway, it describes continuing to retain a certain amount of the industrial mix in that. That is part of the current zoning, and also looking at other uses that might be evaluated in the right proportion of those.
Okay. Mr. Matheson, did you have your hand raised to respond?
Yes, I have a question with regards to the Gateway Master Plan that is talked about in the plan. Do we have an idea as to what the timeline is for starting that study?
That is an excellent question, Mr. Matheson.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so we issued expression of interest. We received proposals. We're in the process of evaluating those proposals. So we do anticipate kicking off, selecting a consultant or consultant team before the end of the year and kicking off the process before the end of the calendar year.
That's very good news.
I agree. All right, so with that, we'll take a slight shift to the east to focus on the Route 1 corridor, excluding transportation policies and actions. That's actually a great idea. Yes, we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you, Vice Chair Young.
I do case. I've been behind the scenes.
Yes. Well, I do consider you the keeper of knowledge on all things Route 1. So we would love to hear it because I think this is essential to the plan's success and very important to many of us here. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we're segueing into the Route 1 plan. So my name is Kristen O'Connor. I'm the Division Chief for Comprehensive and Community Planning. So here we go with Route 1. Next. Okay. Keep going. All right. So DPZ initiated a master planning process for Route 1 in 2018, and we conducted at that time various engagement activities through 2019 that included open houses, roundtable discussions with the business community in Route 1, and community survey and workshops. In 2020, a series of assessments were released, and these assessments were presented. They had the historical context, it identified existing conditions and emerging trends, and it listed topics for further study in the general plan update. In 2021, the findings from the assessment and the community engagement from Route 1 master planning effort were woven into HOCO by Design, because at that time we had initiated the general plan. So this was done to allow for a more comprehensive evaluation of the corridor along with the county as a whole. Community engagement for Route 1's future continued through HOCO by Design's planning process. So what we heard. In continuing with the general plan situation, we also have a what you heard slide. So what did we hear? So we heard there was a strong desire to preserve industrial land. We heard that there's support for redevelopment and mixed uses and amenities for nearby residents. They really wanted coffee shops, sit-down restaurants, retail and entertainment options. We also heard concerns about adequacy of infrastructure, roads, parks, and schools, particularly for current and future residents. And community members also observed that new housing in the corridor provided a relatively affordable housing opportunities for workforce and first-time home buyers. And finally, there is support, according to what we heard, for improving transit in the corridor, especially as ridership will grow. So continuing with the same slides we show for all of it, here are some notable quotes in Route 1. There's more information in our comment log on our website. All right, so this is the important stuff. So the vision. So the plan outlines a vision for Route 1, and that's three-pronged. To preserve Washington Boulevard as an industrial employment corridor and grow the industrial and manufacturing base through redevelopment and reinvestment. 2, target redevelopment and placemaking within a variety of mixed-use walkable districts, our activity centers, which I'll get into in a minute, while preserving historic communities. And finally, promoting safe and efficient travel in the corridor with a focus on infrastructure improvements. All of that we're going to cover in the next work session, so hang tight on the corridor-wide transportation policies when we talk about county-wide transportation policies. All right, we can't forget the communities of Route 1. So with regards to the historic communities, they primarily include Elk Ridge, Lawyers Hill, and Savage, and each one lends a unique history and character to the corridor. All right. Oh, if you go back to that one, I'm sorry, Kate, can you go back to the communities? Not to forget that Elk Ridge, one of the northern gateways, has a strong history tied to the river and the railroad, and Savage is in the southern portion of Route 1 and has a history to the river and the mill. Lawyers Hill is also located in the northern part of the corridor with an established 19th century summer home community and its locally designated historic district. The corridor also has other significant older communities, don't want to forget them either, such as Harwood Park and others. So there are policies in this plan that pertain to these communities, but also I want to remind you that Quality by Design chapter also has applicable policies as well. Sorry, Kate, next slide. All right, so the Route 1 plan is divided into 3 main sections: corridor-wide revitalization strategies, corridor-wide transportation strategies, and specific redevelopment strategies for 3 activity centers. So I'm going to go over 2 of those today, and we're going to hold off on the corridor-wide transportation strategies till next work session. So first I want to outline some of the data and findings that underpin the plan's revitalization and economic development strategies. So there's a strong demand for employment uses in the corridor. We just got through listening to the economic prosperity chapter, so this is kind of echoing what was heard there. For the corridor, the industrial influx is a strong and growing sector. However, land is limited for large distribution facilities, and we acknowledge there could be opportunities to repurpose underutilized land for this use. In terms of office, Route 1 has not historically been conducive to attracting office uses, but our market and economic consultant, HOCO, says there's a demand, and they noted it's a 1.7 million square feet. So, and then the plan proposes an amenity-rich activity centers that can help with this office development, because they will provide those amenity-rich areas that office users want to go to. All right, some challenges to revitalization. The plan identified various challenges to revitalizing the corridor. First, there's an imbalance between residential and commercial mix where retail, commercial, and office has not grown at the same pace as residential. Neighborhoods are physically disconnected, making amenities less accessible. And then there are conflicting and non-conforming uses and the challenges of buffering between long-standing industrial uses and neighborhood residential uses. And finally, a patchwork of small parcels, which are separately owned, means the land needs to be assembled for redevelopment. So fun stuff. We're moving into the policies. So policy 1 for Route 1. As a part of the plan's vision to preserve and grow the industrial base, the first policy in the plan is to protect and support the industrial uses in the corridor to help meet the demand for industrial and flex space. The plan proposes to achieve this by considering flexibility in existing industrial zoning outside of activity centers, evaluating opportunities to repurpose and repurpose underutilized land for large industrial users, and finally, promoting the development of new light industrial and flex spaces, especially in our industrial mixed-use character areas. And finally, to help grow the employment base, the plan targets retail and office in activity centers. Moving on to policies 2 and 3, we also need to prioritize public investment in the corridor to foster revitalization. So given the challenges to revitalization as previously mentioned, the plan proposes to consider establishing a redevelopment authority or similar entity to kickstart reinvestment in the corridor. Such an entity could acquire and assemble land and bring real estate partners to help execute a redevelopment strategy. This proposed quasi-government entity could provide financial and technical assistance to businesses, attract growing business segments, and provide relocation assistance as needed to facilitate redevelopment and revitalization in activity centers. All right, continuing on with policy 2 and 3, we mentioned in previous work sessions that this plan identifies Elkridge as a candidate for Sustainable Communities designation. This is a place-based state of Maryland designation that furthers community development revitalization, and it creates opportunities for local governments, businesses, and some nonprofit organizations to apply for state financing and grants. So some examples of the types of projects that could be funded with state dollars include, but aren't limited to, facade improvement programs, historic wayfinding and signage, sidewalk and streetscape improvements, trail connections, bike lanes, and creating enhanced public community spaces in the Elkridge area. The county already has designations for Ellicott City, North Laurel Savage, and the Long Reach Village Center area. Okay. Continuing on with property tax incentives and tax credits and grants will be next. The tax incentives, the plan recommends offering an expanding property tax incentive as a means to foster revitalization, such as limited reductions in property tax rates on sites that redevelop. These kinds of programs are frequently limited in duration or focused on certain types of development, such as brownfield cleanup, mixed-use development, or growing key business segments. And then tax credits and grants. Mary alluded to earlier the possibility of tax credits and grants. The plan recognizes the need for property improvement programs to address blight and facilitate building rehabilitation in the corridor. Tax credits and facade improvement grants can be used to support these kinds of programs. Since 2014, and we're really proud of this, the Route 1 tax credit program has supported revitalization of dozens of properties in the Route 1 corridor. The Route 1 plan seeks to expand this successful tax program to potentially include properties with residential units, increase the annual allocation amount, and prioritize projects that could offer visual transformation along 1. Other funding opportunities highlighted in the plan, such as facade improvement grants for Elkridge and Savage, or a rehabilitation tax credit could provide expanded support for reinvestment. All right, policy 5. The plan suggests that we adopt new tools to attract and retain new and existing businesses by bolstering small business programs with the Howard County Economic Development Authority, Howard Community College, and Office of Workforce Development, and by partnering with the Maryland Economic Development Corporation to bring in new financing tools to the corridor. Policy 6. As noted earlier, Route 1 corridor has a unique history from Elkridge to Savage and all the legacy and commercial industrial uses in between. They've all contributed to the corridor's sense of place and therefore should be celebrated with uniform future placemaking strategies. Starting with architecture, the plan encourages architecture that promotes a unique brand identity for the Route 1 corridor and promotes contextual architecture design near historic sites to ensure compatibility and promotes adaptive reuse of historic buildings. The plan also advocates for creating recognizable gateways in Policy 7 that help distinguish neighborhoods from each other. As we mentioned in the Quality by Design chapter, design elements matter. And in the Route 1 corridor, the plan states that if we evaluate signage, landscaping, public art, streetscape improvements as key elements of its gateways and seek funding opportunities to incorporate these aesthetic elements. The plan also calls for gateway treatments at bridge crossings at the Patuxent and Patapsco rivers as a high priority for implementation. Branding the corridor. Policy 8, the plan states to create a uniform brand, marketing, and signage plan for the corridor that's consistent, recognizable, and distinguished from the rest of Howard County. To do this, the county's sign ordinance, Route 1 manual, both of them would need to be evaluated when implementing branding and signage and a marketing plan. Policy 9. Finally, with regards to the corridor's overall revitalization strategy, the plan discusses the importance of good site design, and Policy 9 recommends that following the zoning update, the Route 1 manual should be updated so that it provides guidelines on site layout, architectural character, parking configurations, landscaping, screening, lighting, and signage for the entire corridor. Not a small task, but a good task. And as discussed in the Quality by Design chapter, activity centers, including those on Route 1, should be reviewed by DAP. All right, I kept mentioning activity centers, so here goes. So activity centers is the second of 3 prongs in the Route 1 plan. So we're going to end with a discussion of the activity centers and move into transportation later. So, yep. The plan identifies activity centers along Route 1 that, and I just want to say, Plan Howard 2030 identified these things called nodes. So expanding on that nodes idea from 2030, these activity centers are an extension of that idea, that recommendation. So the activity centers along 1 will have a future of mixed-use residential, commercial, retail, and light industrial and office, have safe, efficient, and connected multimodal transit facilities for pedestrians, cyclists, and transit riders, and it creates that critical massing and mix of uses needed for retail success along Route 1. All right, there are various policies and actions that are intended to guide redevelopment of activity centers on Route 1. And a few highlights from the slide include establishing the redevelopment authority or similar entity to catalyze redevelopment, cluster future retail and activity centers. Well, there'll be public plazas, parks, open space that serve a community, the community-wide needs and provide foot traffic for local businesses. Encourage future development in industrial mixed character areas to maintain the grit of an industrial corridor by creating eclectic, creative, and artistic maker spaces. Include infrastructure for bus and shuttle options, bike and pedestrian facilities in redevelopment plans. Review and update design guidelines to provide future transportation connections to nearby neighborhoods. And ensure that new development provides improved stormwater management by using green and nature-based facilities and green building standards and native street tree plantings. All right, so before I get into the redevelopment guidance for specific activity locations, I think we need to stop and kind of let you know how these were, what was the criteria that was the effort that we put into identifying these areas. So in 2018-2019, Route 1's master planning effort, DPZ worked with RKG, an economic planning and real estate consulting firm, to identify 6 potential activity centers. These were presented to the public in 2019, and through the HOCO by Design planning process, the locations were further refined. So you can see them on the map. Those are the 6 identified. Overall, these 6 areas presented opportunities, if redeveloped, to better serve surrounding communities, increase the county's tax base, and revitalize blighted or underutilized properties. But more specifically, the consultant used the following criteria to identify these areas. Underutilized properties in the corridor that were vacant, underdeveloped, large properties with small buildings, publicly owned land and buildings. The consultant also identified properties with blighted uses that fronted 1, including junkyards, auto storage, vacant abandoned properties, properties for general storage, and properties with extensive deferred maintenance. As previously noted, the areas targeted as activity centers were near existing community amenities like MARC stations, libraries, and other residential neighborhoods. And finally, RKG looked at other factors such as relocating and renovating, the feasibility of relocating or renovating businesses and minimizing the loss of industrial zone land. So the activity center districts, so there are 3 of them. We have North Laurel, Dorsey Station, and Elkridge South. So from south to north, we're going to start with the North Laurel district. I just want to note that there is a Annapolis Junction, TOD, is identified on this map as in color. So just wanted to note there's no zoning changes. HOCO by Design does not place any strategies in Annapolis Junction other than the TOD that's currently there. So I'm going to go over the other 3, and I'm going to circle them as I go. The activity centers account for 6.6% of the corridor, or 944 acres out of 4,200 total. All right, so we're going to start with North Laurel. So North Laurel is 230 acres in size. It is the furthest south. It is includes the Laurel Racetrack, the MARC Station, Paddock Point. It's proposed to have 3 different character areas: transit, industrial, and industrial mixed use. The redevelopment vision for North Laurel is to build on the existing transit-oriented community with an entertainment focus that both serves the needs of existing and future residents and offers a destination for neighboring communities. All right, so some policies and actions in the North Laurel district. So Policy 22 calls for the support and expansion of a transit-oriented development in the North Laurel District through the following actions. 1, allow the development of high-rise residential and hotels within the transit activity character area to support non-residential users such as office, retail, and entertainment, and increase MARC ridership. And the second action is to explore incentives that encourage smaller retail, dining, and arts and entertainment uses. And then Policy 23 highlights the need to improve the walkability of the North Laurel District. More bike and ped connections to the North Laurel and City of Laurel MARC stations with the following actions. So the district would need to develop a transportation study focused on that district, promoting the development of complete streets designs, including bike lanes, sidewalks, and shared paths. And Policy 24 identifies the need to create and brand an identity and sense of place in the North Laurel District, with the action to emphasize a sense of place by encouraging public gathering spaces, art, landscaping, improved signage, including gateway signage to celebrate the river crossing. Policy 25 calls for the protection of industrial areas while introducing complementary new land uses within an industrial mixed-use activity character area. So this would support light industrial uses that complement or are compatible with storefronts and outdoor seating and residential uses. So these uses could include small commercial kitchens, breweries, art studios, small manufacturing, and flex spaces that encourage makerspace concepts. And then finally, the last action would be to focus employment uses and eliminate auto-related uses on properties that front Washington Boulevard. All right, moving north, the Dorsey Station District. So we're leapfrogging the Annapolis Junction. So the next one is the Dorsey Station District. This one is located close to 175 and 100, which provides excellent access to Interstate 95 and regional highways. It is 300 acres in size. It contains flex uses. It currently contains flex uses, warehouse facilities, the Dorsey MARC station, and a state-designated TOD. So food trucks are there, auto parts and sales, and car storage also front Route 1 in this district. The character areas include transit and industrial mixed use. So the Dorsey Station District's redevelopment vision is to become a destination that not only celebrates the corridor's industrial heritage, but also uniquely blends the industrial character and new residential and commercial uses. The activity in this district will capitalize on the transit-oriented development around the Dorsey Station. All right, so first policy under the Dorsey Station District highlights the need to capitalize on and support and connect future opportunities to the transit-oriented development around the Dorsey Station. And actions include ensuring future zoning that supports TOD within the state-designated TOD area so that a mix of uses, such as residential, employment, open space, commercial, are encouraged and permitted. And also to expand the TOD zoning to improve all bike and pedestrian connections to the MARC station, including Oxford Square. Moving on to Policy 27, which calls for the protection and promotion of industry in and around the district while creating opportunities for residential, industrial, and commercial uses to coexist within an industrial mixed-use center. And the actions include maintaining a mix of current employment uses, allow industry to remain, and expand IMIX, industrial mixed use, and focus in residential and mixed uses around the MARC station. And also to develop a transportation study for that district as well. Policy 28 highlights the importance of creating opportunities for mix of uses, gathering spaces, and enhanced streetscape and placemaking. And the action here is to provide a central gathering space to allow for community events of varying sizes to celebrate the corridor's industrial heritage and provide opportunities for food trucks in targeted areas to consider creating, a shopping container park. Sweet. Huh?
Shipping container.
A shipping. Oh yeah, shopping container. what was that, a shipping container park. All right, moving up north to Elkridge South. We're getting exciting here. All right, okay, so the Elkridge South District, it is 184 acres inside approximately in size. It fronts Route 1 and is located across from the Elkridge Library, 50-plus Center, and the Do-It-Yourself Center. Residential uses can be found all around the district, including a small portion of Harwood Park, and a future 408 new unit residential project known as the Elms at Elkridge. So currently, there's large industrial warehousing, equipment rental, and car storage that dominate the area, and the character areas that are proposed for this activity center include mixed use and industrial mixed use. So its redevelopment vision is to energize this portion of Route 1, providing a town center feel with opportunities for residential and commercial infill, and to complement the bookend of the North Laurel District to the south. This district is intended to deliver new commercial amenities for existing and new residents. All right, policies. So, Policy 29 calls for the protection and promotion of protection and promotion of industrial and a compatible mix of uses within the Industrial Mixed-Use Activity Center. 30 calls for the facilitation of the redevelopment of mixed-use activity center to include commercial, retail, and residential uses and opportunities for placemaking. And they do this through the action of redeveloping the Route 1 frontage parcels with neighborhood-serving retail and plazas to provide community gathering spaces. Policy 31 proposes an increase in connections between the adjacent sites and neighbors while safely facilitating the maneuvering of truck traffic. So the action here is to develop a transportation study and also create an internal network of streets to improve connections to the Elkridge Library from residential and commercial uses. So finally, I'm sure you're sick of hearing from me, here was takeaways. So we have a handful of takeaways that we'll end with. So the Route 1 plan highlights a redevelopment authority or similar entity that will play a key role to help catalyze redevelopment and revitalize the corridor. As we've seen in previous general plans, zoning alone will not achieve this vision. So this need for a redevelopment plan that involves branding, parcel assemblage, relocation assistance, context-sensitive architecture, public spaces, all for each activity center to achieve a vision and establish its own unique identity. Industrial mixed use offers an opportunity to celebrate the grit of industrial character of the corridor. Activity centers, or nodes as they were in the last general plan, are envisioned to create critical mass and mix of uses that will support future office and retail development. And finally, a combination of public and private investment is needed. So stay tuned for the transportation takeaways at our next session, but I wanted to remind you all that we have Matt Nooncaster online also for some national perspective on industrial mixed use and how it works in other places. So with that, I cede back to the chair.
All right, Ms. Walsh.
Oh, I thought we were taking lunch break first.
Oh my God, you're right. Thank you. I am hungry, so I appreciate that. All right. Is lunch here yet? Well,
I'm happy to go.
okay, yeah, I was going to say we might as well use the time that we have if you don't mind.
Okay. I'm going to go back to one of the first slides that you showed. And I did appreciate a number of the pictures. I think I recognized some properties on both in the general plan document and in here. But I don't know what number slide it is. It's called non-residential market demand. And it talks about the same stuff we talked about this morning, industrial and flex and office. And I do wonder, as you continue to talk, if we need to be more specific about what those three things mean. It almost seems like flex is something in between industrial and office. because I would consider flex and office to be light industrial, I guess, and plain old industrial be heavy industrial, but you guys are talking about all, I think, at least if not in this exercise, in the follow-on one, that we need to seriously consider, just like I think we've all learned that we should consider an agricultural zoning district, that we should be more specific in what we're talking about here, whatever the goals are. That's not my question. My question is actually, though, this bullet about office says all of the things that we heard about from Ms. McManus this morning about Gateway. And so I have a really hard time believing that this county has the resources, the will, the wherewithal, anything to simultaneously or even in quick succession proceed with doing the same kind of thing we're talking about, Gateway from scratch almost, and also doing the same kind of things at 1 or 2 or 3 or more so-called activity centers along Route 1. I totally agree with this, but we already had this conversation this morning about empty, vacant retail spaces, about the Route 1 developers coming and asking us to excuse them entirely from providing this very kind of space. So I just think this is one of the points in the document where we cannot, there is no reasonable way we can achieve what is being described here and also at Gateway. And I think in a large respect, they conflict.
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know if it would be helpful for me to speak a little bit as to how some of these activity centers in the Route 1 corridor, these districts that we're talking about, how are they different from specifically CAC zoning, which, as you know, is specific to the Route 1 corridor. CAC stands for Commercial Activity Corridor. Thank you. So if you look at the map in the plan, it's on page 15. In the Route 1 plan, it shows specifically where the CAC zoning districts are located. And they are dispersed, and generally speaking, each of those specific CAC designations are a bit small in terms of acreage. So what these activity center districts are doing is they're trying to identify sort of larger areas. Are you trying to find, it's page 15 in the Route 1 plan?
I think it's in map 15.
Oh, that's okay. There's a map on page 15 of the Route 1 plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what the activity center districts specifically are doing is they're trying to concentrate these places where the intended, so there were these specific intended outcomes within the CAC zoning districts to create the walkable mixed-use places. So we're trying to be much more kind of focused with where those are, but each of those activity center districts are a little bit larger than these individual CAC zones. So that's one thing that's a little bit different. So like I said, generally activity centers are a bit larger when they compare to CAC districts. And because they're larger, we think that means that they'll have better opportunities for things like trails, public gathering spaces, all those other amenities that we're told office users kind of want to see in the community surrounding where those office spaces are located. So these are amenities that could hopefully attract visitors and new office users. Also, we, as has been mentioned over and over again, we're really trying to create more of a critical mass within these areas that can support commercial development. And then each of these unique activity center districts have a little bit their own unique vision, as was discussed in the plan, which from my understanding is also different from the CAC zoning district. And the plan suggests that we have an entity who's a partner in trying to realize the vision. So as far as I know, we didn't have a clear entity identified to help realize the vision of CAC zoning districts. So we want to have a partner such as a redevelopment authority that might help assemble parcels, a lot of smaller parcels to create a redevelopment size parcel. Or could offer incentives, right, to kind of, again, help catalyze and realize that vision. So those are kind of the difference, though, here, what we feel like is the difference within activity center districts compared to CAC. Now, in terms of the bigger picture, our demand for future office and commercial space. So again, we have been told by our economic consultants that, yes, we are going to see a little bit of a downturn, but it is still projected, the office demand is projected to return to pre-pandemic levels. But I think people are going to be looking for something a little different than a traditional office park, which is why we're proposing these activity centers that have a little bit more of a unique brand or identity. So.
Okay, but still, so how does an industrial mixed-use activity center in Dorsey Park, is that what it's called? for Laurel not compete with what's being also developed or planned at Gateway or North Elkridge?
Well, I mean, I guess that's a question for how do all activity centers not compete with each other? I mean, all activity centers aren't going to come online or be redeveloped at the same time. This is a long-range plan, a 20-year plan, so I think everything will have to come online at different times. And each activity center, including Gateway or these activity center districts, they're all envisioned to be different scales and have slightly different characters and, again, a different brand. So I think we'll absolutely have to be mindful of how these different centers are unique and distinct from each other to avoid the competition that you had mentioned.
So is there a priority among the activity centers, or how is it determined which proceeds first?
I think the issue is honestly, it's the willing property owner aspect. You know, the role that the county plays is ensuring that the vision is outlined, that the zoning and the regulations are in place to achieve what we say we want to achieve, and then that we bring in catalyzing entities like the Redevelopment Authority to kind of kickstart those things. But there's no clear priority between these. We need to walk, chew gum, and do other things at the same time, but making sure that what the county control is not the barrier to seeing the vision being achieved.
Okay, and so that's the problem, is that there isn't an incentive to invest in Route 1. If you want to see an illustration of that, drive on Route 1. Look at the last general plans. This is my concern, is we have this nice shiny object all these people are very excited about at Gateway. And there's no doubt in my mind that that will advance while these same nodes, activity centers, whatever you call them this decade, languish. I thought this was the purpose of this whole concept, was that we figure out a way to actually do better by those communities. And I don't see it, and I see this as setting up to fail. I don't actually buy the critical mass argument. Oxford Square has filled 2 new schools. There's critical mass to overload our school system, but not fill the retail space surrounding that area. I mean, I don't know about Maple Lawn, but that looks like critical mass to me when I see it. But those shop and storefronts are empty too. I mean, what is the critical mass? Do we know? And what if RCLCO is wrong, right? Because we have this whole thing predicated on this guy's analysis that was done before COVID. I mean, this is really troubling to me.
All right, so 2 things. 1, the food is here, so that's good news. 2, why don't you respond to Ms. Walsh, and then I think it'll be Dr. Jones and then myself. I'm definitely going to be asking about the Redevelopment Authority when we come back, because I think that is one of the, sort of game changers for Route 1 in this plan. So please continue, and then we'll break for lunch and return with Redevelopment Authority.
So your question was, what if our economic consultants are wrong about the projected demand? So I don't know if Matt Nooncaster is there to speak to this, but I mean, I can say does that mean that all economic consultants out there are wrong? Are we questioning kind of all economic consultants' projections? Are we questioning how they do their analysis? Are we questioning data that they've used for many, many years and how they do their work, their science?
Yes, Kate McManus told us she went from an occupancy of 500 plus to 50. That is the concern.
Right. And what if they're wrong? I don't know. I mean, I don't think they will be wrong. I mean, we do see right now in the marketplace that there are some employers who are returning back to in the office. So the federal government, for example, they were, as far as I know, I believe 100% remote, 100% telework. Everyone thought it was going to stay that way. They just announced that employees have to start coming back to the office so many days a week. So policies are shifting in the workplace. Things are changing. Now, I can say the general plan in the economic prosperity chapter, we do note that there are all kinds of future technologies that we need to consider. There are various changes that we need to be ready to pivot, right? We need to be ready to be flexible to those changes. But, I mean, right now, what the plan is suggesting is right now, under current zoning, we can accommodate a total of about, I think, 28,000 jobs. If we adopt certain zoning changes, which are primarily targeted in those mixed-use activity centers, places that are intended to be a mix of uses to offer jobs, offer commercial, offer residential opportunities, that's primarily where we're anticipating seeing the most amount of job growth through this general plan update. So we don't want mixed-use activity centers to just be residential. We want to ensure that they're a mix of uses. So I don't think our CLCO is wrong, but another thing I'll point out is the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. They're going to be undertaking a study to take a look at post-pandemic trends in the employment and commercial sector in the region, but that study is not anticipated to be completed until the end of 2024. So that will also help give us some more information. But like I said, my sense is that things will be returning to how it was pre-pandemic.
I think I have just one more general follow along to that, is that what we're dealing with in Howard County is essentially 30 to 40 years of past zoning practices and past private investment practices that lead to single-use areas where you have the same use in a giant mass, and so it's not adaptable and flexible and nimble to changing market conditions. In the same way that if we had been writing our zoning codes and our regulations, and if the market had been constructing buildings that could be more adapted to different uses, it would be better able to respond to these changes. So my view is that what the county needs to do is ensure that when we write the regulations, when we come up with design forms, and when we encourage investment and the private market developing things, that we make sure that they're building buildings that can be adapted for those different kind of uses so that they can respond to the market.
And if I could just add something else, thanks, Jess, for bringing up past practices. So, I mean, mixed-use development, there are only so many developers out there who do that, who do true mixed-use development. So I'm not saying that these changes are going to be simple or easy. And what we are, though, saying is that zoning alone is not going to achieve the vision. So that's why throughout this plan, throughout the Route 1 plan, throughout the HOCO by Design, we recognize that to achieve this vision, we need the zoning, we need the incentives, we need the public-private partnerships to realize it. So we all have to be a part of it. That's all.
All right, it's a good point to break for food and refresh ourselves and rejoin. So we will be back together. Let's do it at 11:30 or 12:30. All right. We have returned to our work session. And let's start off with an overview, if you don't mind, of how Ms. Jones and Ms. Kendall, how you would envision the redevelopment authority working on Route 1 and what we need to be putting in place to ensure that this is really a success. Because I think we've all sort of skirted around the issue, but zoning alone will not fix Route 1. It really is going to take intentional action, incentives, parcel assemblage, and so much more. So let's hear it.
Right. So, thank you. So, what an authority or a similar entity does for Route 1, right, is it kind of, when you see successful redevelopments in other jurisdictions, what you have is you have an entity or of some sort that does project management and public-private partnerships, right? So that is a big piece of it, of what you need to do, like a series of projects that's going to get you to your goal, right? And you also have property planning and acquisitions. You also have the incentives, and then along with that, you have small business counseling and training. So those four things, as you noted before, sometimes, our Route 1 development hasn't been as successful as we like because I think we take an ad hoc approach to it, right? We have some training, and we do business development and training. There are some projects over here, a project over here. Nothing is looked at it in a holistic manner. And the authority or similar entity would take all of that under its umbrella and be intentional about it, because you need more than just an incentive or incentive program, right? You need a series of projects, like I said. You need to be able to assemble parcels. You need to be able to work with private developers, so public-private partnerships, and all that needs to take place in a logical and a methodical manner. And that's what an authority or a similar entity would do. And I think we haven't been successful because we have not been intentional in that way. And Jason and I have done research, and DPZ have done research on other jurisdictions and looked at what made them successful, and it's because there is an entity that takes it upon themselves to, that's their focus, and that's all they do, and that's what you need. So that's just an overview. I mean, if you want to know, and then your second question was, how do we get there, right? What do we need to do? And so Jason's been doing some other research, and he can kind of like explain what needs to be done, what we already can do, and what we need to kind of going forward, what we need to kind of do to kind of augment our authority to do it.
Yeah, and this has been fun to learn more about and to explore. You know, from the research we've done and from the other entities we've seen, it varies, but a lot of times what you have is kind of, as Jennifer mentioned, you have a concerted effort towards focusing on identifying projects, making progress on those projects, and then, you know, showing what it was before, what it was after. And so we've seen it done many different ways, either with a combination of incentives and assemblage, or literally just kind of like promoting programming and promoting opportunities in the district. It's a big canvas to work with. But I think that in Route 1, the more focused we can be on actually cultivating projects and wins, we can build momentum and work with it.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, to that end, almost a throwback to a question from Ms. Walsh earlier, was about prioritization. Are we going to try and focus on different opportunities based on, I guess, interested landowners, you know, how close it is to possible, right? Because we certainly, I know in my district, we have landowners who, you know, have businesses that are doing fine, and it's an auto-related use. They don't want to sell. They don't want to move. Even if it's sort of the county's vision to have a different mix of uses, that business owner is very happy right there. So for willing landowners, opportunity and prioritization.
Well, I was just going to say, I know that there are businesses that are happy with what's going on, but I think I did a focus group earlier this year with Route 1. All of the businesses, though, would like to see revitalization or some sort of, you know, a combination of the things that are in this plan for Route 1. Whether that their particular business, you know, something's going to happen to their particular business, they all see the need for something to be done on Route 1. And a lot of the things that DPZ was talking about in this plan, they are wholeheartedly in favor of. What the issue is that, and I think this is what we're also trying to do at EDA, there is no Route 1 Alliance, or, you know, you heard Gateway Alliance talking about, there's a Downtown Columbia Partnership, there's the Ellicott City Partnership. Now we have disparate owners of businesses, they're putting their head down, doing their thing, trying to run their business and make payroll and support workers, and they have not really come together as one voice. And it's very hard when you have that to kind of move the needle on Route 1 and get their voice. They don't show up at hearings because they're running their business, right? How do we know what they want, right? And so that was the purpose of the focus group. And I think that even, to your point, businesses might be happy with what they're doing. They all see the need for what we're doing. And I think it's helpful to you and helpful to them and EDA if we can kind of, on our end, mobilize them better and create an alliance, which is what we're doing now, so that you understand what their needs are.
Yeah.
And then, did you want to talk a little bit about the different, like how we go about like the next steps in terms of like the entity, like what needs to be done?
Yeah. So, you know, I think the redevelopment authority or entity, I think is important nuance, because there's different ramifications for different entity choices. Just to be clear, is that what you wanted me to get into?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've done some analysis in terms of kind of what the different options could be moving forward. We really feel strongly that we're best situated to help lead this effort. We have the connections with the developers, with the business owners. We have a process already for handling and facilitating funding related to Route 1 initiatives. And we have a really good team that already has an infrastructure in place for assessing opportunities and deploying capital from the finance side. So, yeah.
And then I guess, is there anything that DPZ would like to add in that realm? I understand if EDA, that's more EDA bread and butter, but.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they covered it. I mean, just to speak to your question about prioritization of these different activity centers, I mean, no, the plan doesn't really speak to any particular prioritizations. So whether or not that's something for discussion, I don't know, but.
But I understand. I mean, I understand. I've talked to Ms. Walsh and I talked to you and Ms. Young, and I know that they're along Route 1. Elk Ridge is an area where you want to see progress, and I understand that. And you want to, obviously, there's Savage and Laurel where you want to see progress. So we'd have to take a step back and I would think, step back and make sure that we took an approach that honored both of your priorities. I mean, that would be something to kind of look at in terms of projects, right? Because we wouldn't want to just start in Jessup and focus just on Jessup, right? We won't start in Elk Ridge and focus just on Elk Ridge. So I guess the projects and the prioritization is part of further down the line. We would have to kind of, figure out what this entity looks like, what are the things that are going to make Route 1 accomplish the goals in the plan, and what are the projects needed to move that forward, right? And it's going to be all the way from Elk Ridge to North Laurel. And then and there would be constant dialogue and communication with us because we want partnerships, right? So we want people in the different areas to feel like they're being heard and to, all the communities to be elevated.
I mean, I think at least from my perspective, I don't necessarily need, it's not that I feel like, oh, my communities need to be first in line. I would almost prefer, let's do it really, really well. Let's show what is possible. And then I think that will absolutely help bring in outside entities because they'll see it, they'll feel it, they'll know it, they'll see it's successful. You can show them, and then that will beget more investment. So having that prioritization conversation, I think, is pretty important because, we don't have massive teams. We run a leaner shop than a lot of other departments, speaking specifically to DPZ. And so I think it's essential that we do it well, and we get it right, so we show what's possible on Route 1 and get folks excited about that. So I don't know if I've just shot myself in the foot there, but.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I'll to add is I think taking an inventory of the feedback, the opportunities kind of throughout the corridor in the specific areas. But I think there's also short, medium, and long-term projects we can work on. So I think we have to have a blend of shorter-term things that you can feel on the ground that build involvement, build impact, and then teeing up to maybe more midterm projects where there's construction involved or assemblage involved. But I think, you can't plan to plan, right? So we got to get some projects through, and I think working with you guys and saying, hey, where's the most meaningful opportunity to start is going to be key. And I know we can do both Route 1 activities and gateway activities and all the other areas that need attention because phasing is a huge component to that, but I think there's a way to layer it down where we're able to serve multiple areas of the community in parallel.
Yeah. And a project-based approach, allows for that, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody can see the project we're working on now, what we need to do for this project, and when we just move, forward along the plan. I mean, that's the way to get things done.
I won't say the name of the parcel out loud, but I'm sure everyone here knows my priority on Route 1 and the parcel assemblage. So, Ms. Young?
What do you all consider successful on Route 1? As a reflection of what you are recommending occur.
Well, I guess it would be to overall realize the vision for Route 1, which was to ensure that our industrial areas, right, so the places where we can preserve and protect and promote industrial opportunities, that they remain, that we have incentives available to support those industrial businesses so they can continue to be places.
No, that wasn't my question. My question was, what do you consider is already a successful example of what has happened on Route 1 that would in any way reflect this plan for Route 1? And there's been what, 1, 2, 3, and you guys know better than me, there's been 3 Route 1 plans, and this is now going to be the 4th one in this general plan. So what has actually happened in any of those Route 1 plans that shows that we can be successful by coming up with a Route 1 corridor plan? And if there isn't anything, that's fine.
Yeah, I
Maybe
get-
that just means we double down our efforts, and I'm looking at EDA, who's just said that they're happy to help, okay? But I do think that I'm looking at you guys. This is, let's get down to reality here. This general plan has a lot of, whoa, this would be wonderful, let's have signage. I saw that hotel sign. I see all those hotel signs every time I go down Route 1. Every time I go down Route 1 and I see all those hotel signs, I think to myself, wow, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to look at those hotel signs? It makes, well, I don't want to, motel signs, yes. I'm not going to say what I think it makes Route 1 look like, but I don't know. I guess here's the question, and it was somewhat alluded to by EDA and somewhat alluded to by you guys and by Ms. Rigby as well. If these people don't want to move, if they want to stay right where they are, if they like their place and their space and what they're doing, you said, let's see, I wrote it down because I was so happy to hear you say it. How can we get rid of the auto uses from the front of Route 1? I personally don't think that there's anything that would be more important than that in terms of what Route 1 looks like. And that doesn't necessarily mean getting rid of the business, but finding another place for them to locate back behind maybe the frontage of Route 1 so that that isn't what you see when you drive down Route 1. How do you do that? I don't know how you do that without giving these businesses money. There's not enough incentive, I don't think, that we would literally have to pay them in order to do that. How do we get people to put up new signs? I love that North Laurel sign. In the little gate that it had, that it looked beautiful. And I would love to see signs like that actually all over Howard County. But we're going to have to pay for that. And if somebody wants other signage, if we say, okay, here's the signage we'd like to, even if some of these businesses stay, used car business, okay? And we don't want it to be a big neon sign with part of the sign unlit and another part of it broken, okay? Let's say we don't want that, all right? But the owner of that business says, oh, no, nope, you want me to get a new sign? You're going to have to pay for the new sign, and that new sign's going to cost, these signs are actually not cheap at all. They're $10,000, $20,000. Okay, I will stop, and you can tell me how we are going to get this done.
Yeah, so you had a lot of questions in there. I'm just going to start with more so the businesses along Route 1, specifically in activity centers, who say they want to stay where they are at. And
now, when you say that, are you including all the car businesses?
Well, just, I'm trying
and
to answer.
And the hotels and motels?
Yeah, I'm trying to answer your question. So within activity centers, we're suggesting that if there are businesses, say in one of these mixed-use activity centers that, really won't lend themselves so much to the vision, then there could be a few things we could do. There's relocation assistance. Yeah, that may be pricey. That might work for some, that might not work for all. We have a Route 1 tax credit program, which we're talking about expanding. And the tax credit program incentivizes property owners to make specific aesthetic improvements on their property that will have a visual impact on Route 1. So we're proposing to, again, expand how that tax credit could be used so that we can improve the aesthetics. So that is something that a private property owner takes on. Yes, that means less revenues generated from property taxes, but that's a bit of a private property choice. And then we have grant programs. So we're looking at ways that we might be able to offer some sort of facade improvement grant program, storefront improvement grant program. There could even be other types of landscaping opportunities where we might be able to get, there are state funds that you can get to apply for these kinds of grant programs where you would match the cost of, say, improving some signage or improving an exterior, and you match it with a private property owner. And those facade improvement programs have been very successful in many communities all over the state. And I could speak about that a little bit more if you want.
Okay, now I'm going to go into a couple more things. What did we have, 8 businesses in the last 5 years who took advantage of those tax credit programs? Because I know you guys have reported on those every year.
And we can probably
Since
say a
it-
little bit
well,
on
just-
tax credits, but just to make sure we can get a full round through.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just had one, I have another question that I'm concerned about. Tax incentives for brownfield cleanups. Why would we give businesses a tax incentive to clean up, if it's a brownfield? Isn't it required by our environmental laws to be cleaned up? Why would we need to give these businesses a tax incentive to clean it up? Can anybody answer that?
It's depends on the regulation that applies. Some regulations are only triggered when you actually start doing an activity on the site and you're actually touching the soil, and then you need to bring it up to a certain standard. That's different than certain hazardous sites where there's actually an active problem that needs to get cleaned up. So it's difficult to answer that particular question because it's very specific to the regulation, the regulating entity, whether it's state, federal, or local, and then the site itself.
If I could just add to that, it also depends on how the site's going to be reused. So there are different standards for cleanup depending upon the reuse of the site. If you're just going to reuse the site, say, for commercial only, then the level of mitigation that you have to do, the level of remediation you have to do to the site might not be as much as, say, if you're going to be using it for residential purposes. So the idea is that depending upon the location of a brownfield site, what do we want the vision to be? Well, if we want it to be a mix of uses, then there may need to be incentives to help cover those costs of remediation.
Okay, that doesn't make sense to me. If they're going to be able to develop it as a mixed use, seems like they can pay to clean up the brownfield, but it's my view.
All right. Mr. Youngman?
Quick question on this tax credit thing. It was created to help sort of beautify, stopgap beautify Route 1. Haven't some of the bigger grants been buildings that don't have Route 1 frontage? And why are we doing that?
The Route 1 tax credit program, yes. I'm looking at Kristen because you've been around for a while, and it was specifically established. Yeah, so if I can answer that one. Last year, we had a hotel that fronted 175 and 1, big hotel, big frontage, big user of the tax credit, so had a lot of visual.
Talking about the businesses on Main Street, Elkridge.
So Main Street, Elkridge, so in 2014, this tax credit was made available, and then at about 2016, 2018, it was extended into Elkridge, and so there was an additional area. So not only was it originally identified for the frontage of Route 1, if you had a side view or a front view, now a new area and a new boundary was added. So why?
I remember now. It was
It
one
was
of
a
the last
council
things
bill.
the previous council did before we came in.
So we just had to accept it, and then.
Yeah. So my big question is, and let's go back 20 years. Okay, we're walking up and down Route 1, looks junky, looks crappy, and some genius said, let's clear out a bunch of our industrial big parcels and build townhouses and move a bunch of people into here, and then that will enable us to build better retail, and I get it. And there's a good chance everybody in this room would have sort of jumped on board with that plan. Well, here we are looking back. We gave up a ton of our big industrial sites that we would love to get back, and we've parked thousands of people onto Route 1 that want it to be residential, and it's not going to be. We can't make Route 1 residential. And even these activity centers, they're not connecting Blue Stream and Hartwood and Howard Square, like the people that we've already kind of moved there. It's not really connecting those. It's just creating more of these centers where we're going to move people who aren't going to want it to be industrial and with trucks on the road. And I just, shouldn't we just be saying, look, it's going to stay an industrial area of the county. we're not going to move more people onto this. We're going to build warehouses. We're not going to build Starbucks. Like, are we just kind of trying to fix the mistake we made by doubling down on it?
Well, from what we heard through a lot of our public outreach and engagement.
But those are the people that we moved there. And I
Right.
get that. But we moved them there by mistake. We did.
So when we start to talk about the corridor-wide transportation policies, and even some of the policies within these individual activity centers, because you're right, there needs to be a plan to connect the residents who are there to these activity centers. And that is what we are certainly going to be looking at. Each activity center says that we need to develop a transportation plan for that specific activity center so that it's connected within, and then neighborhoods outside of those activity centers can connect to them. So that is absolutely, you're 100% right, something that needs to be done in order to make this successful.
But again, we're now going to double the amount of people that we're going to convince to buy $500,000 townhouses. And those home sellers, NV and Keelty and whoever else, are going to be, it's like, oh, Route 1, all the warehouses are going to be gone someday, and it's going to look like, Ellicott City, or it's going to look like Columbia, or whatever it's going to look like. And now you have, for the next general plan, twice as many people coming in and saying, we don't want Route 1 to look industrial, we want connections, and we want all these things. Don't we have to decide right now, is Route 1 where we're going to have it doesn't mean industrial has to be ugly. We talked about it this morning. The building can have different uses. It doesn't have to look like it did 25 years ago. But are we just perpetuating this squeezing industrial out of that corridor where we have nowhere else to put it?
Well, the plan does say that the majority of the future residential in the Route 1 corridor would be targeted to these 3 activity center nodes, in addition to, all of the other mix of uses that are envisioned. And I don't know if it would be helpful to speak to places that have done more of this mixed-use development within industrial areas a little bit successfully. So, for example, I know you've been to the Beltline in Atlanta. Also, I can speak to places like Scott's Addition in Richmond. Those are places that have intentionally planned for a mix of industrial and residential uses. So it's done. It's out there. It's being done.
I just worry, and maybe it comes down to the marketing, and it comes down to, despite an entire page in our contract encouraging people to look at the general plans before they buy houses, that you're just going to have twice as many people in 10 years saying, well, I bought my house here, and I thought it was all going to start to look like this, and now you're building all these warehouses, and why are all these trucks speeding up and down?
Well, I mean, maintaining the industrial, quote-unquote, grid of the area is a part of the brand, so long as we don't brand these activity centers as something they're not intended to be. I don't know if...
I just worry bringing more residential onto Route 1 as a way to fix the fact that we brought residential into Route 1. If that makes sense.
I think, from my perspective, it's recognizing that there are existing communities. I lived on the Route 1 corridor for 5.5 years. I was one of those residential people where I could walk to Route 1, but that's not my direct community. What I wanted, though, was to be able to cross the street and go to Black Flag Brewery, because that's a industrial use that has found a home in the Route 1 corridor that has a huge draw that is very compatible with residential uses. And so a lot of the Route 1 corridor is talking about what's the infill synergy that can support and connect and expand on that opportunity, and what can we do when we get to the transportation to support that kind of movement, because that brewery and a lot of the other industrial uses, they still need their trucks to go through. It's still a major transportation corridor in the region, and we just have to recognize that reality. So a lot of it, I think, comes back to several months ago when we started talking about quality by design and dynamic neighborhoods, and the form that kind of housing takes, making sure people know what they're buying into, making sure the form is actually built to be compatible with the kinds of uses that we're planning there. That's a really broad overview, but I think the reality is we can't ignore the fact that we have those existing uses, we have those existing communities, and how can we create localized nodes and hubs that provide the right kind of uses and the critical mass to support that residential development that's already there.
That makes a lot of sense. And, it's coming from two people. It makes sense too, because we kind of know we do this for a living. We kind of know how this stuff works. And I guess it is sort of in the setting of the expectations. Like how do you, when you sell these things, and plus, like we're viewing like Black Flag as an industrial use, but it's
retail.
Sorry, we're talking about Jailbreak, just for the record.
Yeah, it's office park-ish. It's not, it's not a last mile center. It's not flex space. It's, so I just think a big piece of this, if this is actually what we go forth with, is, these communities are going to have to be marketed correctly. We cannot, I won't be here. You guys will still be here. But when you're doing this general plan again in 10 years, you have people just screaming, we don't want all this industrial on Route 1. It's a residential community now, because we sort of took it further down that road. And it's a little bit, and again, light industrial, like, I get it. That's great. But at some point, we're going to need the warehouses. We're going to need the flex space. We're going to need light manufacturing. We're going to need last mile. And that's really not the stuff that people, I don't want to live next door to it, so.
So we have Matt Nooncaster on the phone. If he wants to add anything, he's done, seen these in many places around the nation. So maybe if he can speak a little bit to his experience. Matt?
We bored him into oblivion.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you all very much. It's been a good discussion so far. I think I come back to what you've all been saying before, which is it's all about context and what brand you want to put out there for the corridor. At least from my participation in the planning process, and I haven't been part of the other iterations before, but it really came to light that Create US 1 is something different from everything west of I-95. I mean, we don't need to bring it and make it Columbia East or something of that nature. And so if you do that, and Councilman Youngman, to your point, you have to sell it in a way that while one or more of us may not want to live in that type of environment, you create a mixed-use village flair or vibe where the buildings almost look like they're industrial buildings too. And they'll attract certain people who want to be next to the brewery and those kind of things. But it almost comes into, if you continue to build residential like you have in the one corridor and people move into that and say, oh, this building looks like what's over in Columbia or somewhere else, and I expect that lifestyle when I get there. And so it really does come into creating a different and unique sense of place if you're going to put residential in with industrial for this area.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, which is, it's how the South's marketed, it's how it's the brand, right? But we can't control it much past this. You're going to have a landowner that's going to sell to a developer, that's going to sell to a home builder, that's going to sell to a consumer, and we're not involved in any of that.
Actually, we do say we need to update the Route 1 design guidelines, right? There needs to also, we do recommend within activity centers, they should go to DAP. So there are recommendations for how we can influence what the brand will be in the future.
Okay, thanks. No, it took a lot of time. So.
Ms. Walsh?
Everything that maybe even Christiana said, and Deb and David, I totally agree with. I mean, at this point, I feel like we're cycling. The concern I have with what remains in this plan, even if I were to think it was actually going to be executable this time, unlike every other time, is that even those 3 activity centers that you've whittled down from the prior however many nodes, each of those places, at least in my view, have very different brands and characteristics that make them special. Like, my Elkridge is auto-centric. I like those motels, and Jennifer Jones of EDA knows that. Not perhaps as they are currently used, but I see a real ecotourism in my part of Elkridge. We're right up against Patapsco River that's totally ignored. We're right on the Patapsco State Park. We got Rockburn Branch State Park. That that is my Elkridge. I have Daniel's Open Air Bar. Like, that is my Elkridge. I have historic Elkridge. I have Raskeller and Elkridge Furnace Inn. That's my Elkridge. That's totally different than Jessup or the Mark Station or Savage. And I think you have to approach them differently, or you're diluting that. What I don't want, and unfortunately, you know, I did flip through that Route 1 tax credit thing, is great. We're like painting these kind of, what's the word for ubiquitous? You can't look at any of those updates that we're paying for on the tax credit and be like, that's my Route 1. You know, we're not up to it, you know, we're not doing a Cindy soft serve sign, or we're just not, I don't think we're exalting the things that make those places special. And what I don't want is 11 miles of strip mile that looks like any place else in suburbia. I think a lot of this imagined industrial mixed-use activity center that you have relies on an urban core, and we don't have that. We are suburban. I mean, you're talking about, you have to get in your car to cross Route 1 in many places, and I think any transportation engineer tells you the problem is that road, the speed of it, the users of it, the width of it, you can't even cross it in most places barely in time for that light. And, you know, I know Christiana's been kicking and screaming about it. When I ran the first time in 2018, we heard about Maryland Department of Transportation safety improvements that have yet to materialize. So I will tell you this, you don't want to cut in line for Jessup. I want to step out of line. And I've daylighted this to Director Eisenberg and to many of your crew. My very utmost want to talk about, seriously want to see passed amendment to this general plan is taking out that mixed-use activity center in South Elkridge. That is the spot that that community has identified for where they would like to see community placemaking. Whether it's a high school or the community center they've been, you know, promised forever and ever, whether it's a whole bunch of open air fields and what's now parking lots, it takes the traffic off in terms of trucks landing right across the street from a library, but it also reuses that for something that's community building. That part of Elkridge does not need another new home forever and ever. And I think the last rental market surveys will tell you that. That is not, I don't think, what my community wants, and that's why hopefully with council administrator's assistance, we will get that amendment out early so that you can actually see what it looks like. Tell me if you want to make it better. Tell me if that means I should say, let's be doing more in historic Elkridge, because that is a gem, and that's where I really see the benefit of this aggregation of parcels. I think that was probably what was being attempted when those tax credits you were asking about, Mr. Youngman, got extended. But do it on behalf of the people who live there, the public, the history, but I mean, we lost a drive-in movie theater. How cool would that have been to have during COVID? Like, that part of Elkridge, that is the automobile. Like, those are the pictures in your chapter section. And, you know, that's the part I can speak to because that's the part I care the most about. But it doesn't mean I don't care about the other parts. It means I know I'm less capable of defining what those characteristics are that we should be exalting there. But that is, you know, I called it my death match amendment. Like, that I really think there's an opportunity here. I love the aggregation of parcels and the redevelopment authority. I think we can do better by Elkridge, and I think I have an idea, and if we can work towards getting that in place, then I'm happy to do that.
Just want you to know that you've given me a very exciting idea of bike-in movies, because they need less space than cars. You know, like Rec and Parks could totally have these events, so. Poor Rec and Parks. I'll be following up about a potential bike-in movie at Savage Park.
Because you don't need the little pedestal anymore because it's all on your radio. So I was actually going where David was, which is playing fields during the day and a movie theater.
And drive through at night, driving at night.
So, I mean, I think that Ms. Walsh is right, especially about Elkridge Main Street. It is a gem. And the other, I don't know, they're kind of like cousins, I feel like Savage, Maine, and Elkridge, Maine, because they came into existence at similar times. They have some similar themes. So one of the questions that I had, it almost ties between the previous chapter and this chapter, but in the arts areas, I noticed that we're almost missing a southeast arts. We have Columbia, we have Ellicott City, we have Long Reach, you know, and downtown, but we really don't have anything in the southeast. And there's already a natural co-location of a lot of arts uses at the mill. Although we're losing our studio and our gallery, that is one of the galleries that is there. There's Clay Coven, Neighbor Made. There's so many. There's G&H Workshop. Candy's Candles, and they do a lot of crafts activities with the community as well. So I would love to continue a conversation, not necessarily today, but as an amendment, about adding an arts focus in Savage, because those uses are already occurring naturally, and I think the more that we can do to bolster that, I think that will really support the community there. Okay, cool. Ms. Young?
Speaking of arts, I forgot to ask this question this morning. You still have in the economic prosperity chapter, you still have Long Reach Village as an art center, and we're putting it up for auction, I guess. We have an RFP out there. Is there a reason why that's still in there as an art center? I assume that whoever decides to buy the village center can do whatever they want to with it, and they can keep it or get rid of it, or that there's no obligation in the RFP to continue on with the activities that are there right now.
So the RFP, which went out just a few months ago, was obviously new compared to the plan, which was really recognizing how arts had served in the process of the Long Reach Rising kind of investment that went into between the two RFP processes, the one that went before and the one that's currently. And then also there's an existing private user. As you know, Columbia Association of the Arts Center is not scheduled to move out of the Long Reach Village Center.
It is or is
It
not?
is not scheduled to. So that was likely going to
Is
remain.
that property owned by CA?
Yes, it is.
Okay, but so the RFP is just for the property that's not owned.
It's for the
just
county-owned sections.
County-owned section, right. Back to my question. Does the RFP require that the tenants who are there now remain?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so then I have a larger question here for DPZ, and that is, as we go through this plan and we point out things like this, which is small but big, are you all going to be doing technical amendments? Are you taking notes on these things and recognizing that you need to make changes to this plan as we're going along? And are you going to submit those technical amendments to us? I know have you actually sent them up? Ms. Harrod has sent up, I think, at least 20 or so technical amendments that I have already created for you all during the course of this time. But do I need to say that Long Reach Village needs to be taken out as a major arts center here in economic prosperity, given that there's an RFP, and even before this gets passed, we may have a buyer for this property. We don't know.
So a couple parts. My understanding of the Long Reach RFP, it does say that we do want to continue to have some sort of arts to be incorporated into its redevelopment. So my understanding, that is a part of the RFP, which was something we looked at actually when we were preparing for this meeting. And it's like, wait, we got to make sure the RFP includes this as still a part of the vision. But as we're hearing all of your comments, concerns, yes, we are absolutely having discussions about what would be, a potential amendment in response. So what that process is going to be, those are part of the reasons why we're trying to have as many one-on-ones with you as possible to kind of discuss some of this.
So the last one-on-one, I actually asked a major question that was a month ago, which I still haven't gotten an answer to, and that is whether the 7,080 units that were in production or various stages of approval are included in the 27,000 units that you were projecting for a 20-year plan. And if they are, great. If they're not, then we're looking at 34,000 units and a potential, we don't know how many in Gateway, maybe 7,000, maybe 8,000. So we're actually looking at a plan that you're proposing of 41 to 42,000 units, if it includes the Gateway master plan as well. So I'm still trying to get a hold of that number, and it's now September 7th. Our meeting was on August 8th, We did a follow-up on August 21st, and I still have not gotten the answer to those two simple questions. And that has a lot to do with how I view this entire plan. So I would really appreciate it. And
Yeah,
that's
no,
why
I-
I'm saying it out loud now here in this meeting, so that you will hear once again that I am asking for this information.
Yes, and we appreciate your patience as we pull together a multitude of requests and respond to a multitude of questions that we have gotten throughout this process.
That's pretty much my main question. That's been it. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Youngman?
I yield to the councilwoman from District 1.
Ms. Walsh?
I think I've said my piece on Route 1.
How many people live in mobile home parks on Route 1? I mean, I counted 1, 2, 3, 4 references to our mobile home parks, 3 of them in this Route 1 section. And there's one policy aim of, I think we say striving to ensure at least a one-to-one replacement. I don't think our county has a good record on that front. But I would have liked to have seen that population addressed more directly.
Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on the population within mobile home parks, but do you have, what do you recommend as specifically how we would address that population?
Well, I think at a minimum, we would, rather than strive, we would ensure a one-to-one replacement. But, I guess we'll see as some of these enterprise projects in downtown or in Columbia are being done. But I know from like a Duckett's Lane community, like that is a community. And so the notion of those kinds of places being slated for redevelopment, I think there is kind of a nod to that redevelopment of older mobile home parks, you say in Dynamic Neighborhoods 54. But you don't really say why or where particularly or what happens to the people and the families that live there. And I think, unless you tell me it's an insignificant number of people, in which case I would not believe that, I think it's something that needs to be dealt with directly and in a more perhaps thoughtful and complete way than this is. My preference obviously is to keep families and communities intact where their kids go to school and where they're either, have daycare providers or family members or neighbors or whatever helping them. And if there's a better place to do that than Route 1 and in these locations, cool. But I just, again, I think it's Oxford Square, Howard Square, where we said we were going to do that, and we didn't do that. But I have seen firsthand, particularly in COVID, those communities, particularly at Duckett Lane, like that's a for real place where babies grow up and people take care of each other. And I would like us to support them in that endeavor more than we are doing in this document now.
I guess I just want to let you know, Mr. Youngman, we do have a Starbucks, at least one, on Route 1 already.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we do. And I think people want a lot more
And 2 Taco
of them.
Bells, and a lot of Dunkin' Donuts.
When did Starbucks become the thing that we use as like the
It's
thing when
bougie.
we're trying to make a point?
Oh,
It's
because
like
it
our go-to
replaced public
thing.
bathrooms.
It's the bougie Dunkin'. But I mean, I think one thing I just want to recognize holistically is that I appreciate the level of detail that is in this section for Route 1. I feel like it lays out a better game plan, and there are elements that obviously need further, like with the redevelopment authority, that just cannot be as detailed in this step. But I know that some of the previous plans have not come to fruition, but B, even just the plans themselves have been a little disappointing. But I did want to ask Mr. Newcaster, if you can, I've looked up Scott's Addition, but other places that are this long linear corridor, like Route 1, I think that the activity center and industrial use in the middle, and I think that will obviously, I'm reading between the lines, and it seems like we're going to free up. Currently, you can't do warehouse uses in a lot of Route a lot of the CAC districts on Route 1. So this would allow that to occur again and really provide those warehouse uses. And then at the activity centers, you would have a much more denser use and have those things co-located. But Mr. Newcastle, in terms of these long linear trouble spots, how have other people solved the problem? And if you point to Prince George's County, I will just cry because it's so close, yet so different, just down Route 1.
No, you're right on. First of all, to create an 11-mile place is near impossible, right? You try to find loose affiliations between the different areas, but as some of the other council members have mentioned today, each of these are very unique and should be treated uniquely in its applications and how you want to invest in them. And that level of investment can be different, more intense, less intense, different look and feel and vibe, different set of uses, those kind of things are there. But what I have found in the past is you really focus on a couple of centers or nodes or activity centers in this genre, and then see if it catches fire and see if it starts to fill in the gaps in between them. But just with limited resources, limited patience, the ability to incentivize or direct or add additional effort into seeing change occur or protect what's there already right now, it's easier to start in smaller areas, which were the activity centers that were identified right now. Usually things that are much longer, like the length of this corridor, are connected by something like the rail line with Mark or something like that, that maybe is a secondary effort that's going on. But even there, it's really where the stations are that are most important. But 11 miles is tough to think that you're just going to make it all the same from one end to the other. And so going back to the larger initiative about industrial and those kind of things, it just kind of made sense to the areas in between the activity centers to try to protect them for whether it's last mile or the next phenomenon of industrial development. You all are in a great part of the region to really be able to capitalize on some cool industrial initiatives that are going on in the country.
And last thing I'll just say on that note is I really do appreciate how you've laid out the opportunities possible for the North Laurel TOD specifically. The residents there, I've heard they want better connections to the waterfront. One of my favorite ribbon cuttings we've ever done is for the sidewalk across the bridge to Main Street, because it seems little, but that is one of the most important connections for those folks. It's where they walk to get coffee, not today because it's 1,000,000 degrees, but at these other opportunities, and they want that commercial aspect. The residents now are very concerned that some of the commercial activities won't come to fruition. So I'm glad that you heard them, you included their feedback in this plan, and I really, really hope to see it come to fruition. Ms. Young.
I don't have any more questions.
We are 6 minutes away from ending on time. Mr. Youngman?
No, I'm going to help
All
you
right,
finish
we're
on
going
time.
to. Don't count your minutes before they hatch.
No. I wanted to ask about the map, Route 1, 2. It's on page 14 of the Route 1 section. And I wondered here, because we say elsewhere, and again, I've had this conversation with you all at DPZ, we say somewhere in this document that the future land use map is not a parcel-specific map, but this is totally, whether you're looking at the whole county or just this section of the county that is the Route 1 corridor, like these are parcel lines that are drawn in here, whether in blue or red or yellow or whatever. I wondered what on this map is different from current zoning, and how close is this kind of map where we are assigning colors to what sure look like zoning kind of districts? Like, how different is this from what we're going to do next in comp rezoning? Like, it seems like you're telling us already in these kinds of maps with this specificity, this is what these parcels are going to be zoned, and right, aren't you?
Well, we're saying this is the intended character of these areas, which will certainly help inform the comp rezoning, but this plan does state that a lot of the current zoning that is on the ground will essentially remain. The majority of the changes zoning changes that we're envisioning in this area are where there are the activity center districts. So I hope that answered your question.
Well, it does, and I think we touched on this in our prior discussion, which is, why wouldn't you revert to a map like we saw in those first early work sessions for the first time, and I see is now posted up on the website, which shows the activity centers in lieu of something like this that has an assigned color for every single parcel in the county, you know, minimized down to fit on an 8.5 by 11 size sheet. Well, I mean, isn't that really, I mean, that's what I heard in the first couple of work sessions was, okay, I read some part of this, but really what you guys are talking about is activity centers and focusing most of redevelopment efforts and planning and all of that in the activity centers. So why, you know, again, another one of the proposals that hopefully will emerge from our drafting soon will be this notion of, let's revert to that more general map that shows, you know, some circles in some specifically located places. And then if this really does just revert to whatever's there now, then, you know, what is the point of depicting that in color for the next 10 or 15 years?
I mean, we do think it's a good idea to have that activity center map. That makes a lot of sense because that clearly shows where we're targeting, you know, reinvestment, growth, redevelopment over the next 20 years in this plan. So that is a great idea. Specifically, though, where we run into challenges with kind of disregarding this future land use map is because we do reference a lot of these character areas throughout the plan. So it would be, it's just fairly heavily woven into the plan as a whole. Now, I absolutely agree. We think that there could be ways to try to create some more generalized maps that might better define what it is that you want to define. But I think these are all good conversations, good suggestions, and we're certainly looking at ways if any of them can be addressed. But this future land use map, there's so many of these character areas that have just been woven into other sections and other parts of the plan.
Okay. And I didn't go back and look it up in the dynamic. Special use is defined somewhere else in this document? Okay. Okay. I know Deb asked about amendments, and the council, I assume maybe DPC has as well, has gotten the correspondence saying, how are we to have a public hearing on technical amendments that notwithstanding, I mean, we've tried to at least, you know, get in process the ones that we knew were, for example, the entitled deathmatch ones. But, you know, they're still not out yet. There's just one, Christiana. It's the South Elk Ridge Deathmatch. Yes, it is. It is.
If that's the biggest death.
Woo! It is literally entitled. No, it's just the District 1. Like, this is what I care about.
That's the only deathmatch. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But, you know, notwithstanding having identified that, like, it's still taking some time to emerge. We haven't seen technical amendments from DPZ, assuming that they're coming just on some basic typos or updating. Like, how do we approach the next whatever weeks of this and ensure that a public has the opportunity to weigh in on these amendments that we're all still talking about conceptually?
So process-wise, I was pretty surprised to read that email because it follows our standard process. I think if we flip-flop the process, that would be more confusing for people. And secondly, the reason would be there are going to be amendments that the public has that we haven't even thought about. And I think it's important that we have time to hear from them, draft those amendments, and file them prior to pre-file. So we want to make sure we hear their amendments. And if we haven't covered one, then we have the opportunity to incorporate it. And then the opportunity to send your feedback is, I mean, you can always email, call, carrier pigeon. You know, we always have the hearing and then file the amendments. That is the standard practice for every general plan and for every piece of legislation. So I was, I guess, flummoxed by that because I don't want us to file, have a public hearing, and then people have good ideas, and we're, okay, well, now we need 4 people to introduce this amendment.
But we've got amendments all the way.
So I mean, I would disagree with you. I think that first of all, we've only had 5 general plans in the history of Howard County. So it's not like every general plan. And this is an opportunity after, number one, first to hear what the public would like us to put in as amendments, then for us to do our filing of amendments then for the public to see what the amendments look like, both from, have their suggestions been incorporated? Do our amendments somewhat cover the types of things that they're concerned about? And then allow the public to come in one more time and make, one last appeal to say, please file this amendment to your amendment or this other person's amendment, because this is really important. And I think it's a good thing to let the public weigh in at that point.
Are you
We only
saying they
do
don't
this
have an
once every 10
opportunity?
years.
Are you saying they don't have an opportunity to weigh in on filed amendments?
I think that allowing them to come in and testify in person is appropriate for something of this magnitude.
I just would really hope that people would be sending their feedback in, and I think it is wrong to elevate in-person verbal public comment over written public comment.
I think some people feel like they're better at saying these things publicly in person than they are writing.
Well, they could make a video and email it if they feel more comfortable with verbal. That's certainly an option if that's, writing or communicating in that way is undesirable.
I don't know why we wouldn't just have one last public hearing before we vote and after the amendments have been filed, so that the public, if they want, can have a chance to come in and weigh in on these amendments in the plan as it is then, as it then appears it could be. I mean, once every 10 years, I think that we can have an extra hearing. I don't think it's too much to ask of the county council.
It's always helpful to have that feedback early, like when we publish the calendars. Mr. Youngman?
I'm not opposed to having a individuals from the public hearing. What I'm not going to do is sit in there for 6 hours while all of the advocacy groups, all the people that have chimed in, all the 74 people that want the same thing come and testify again. They've already informed us, they've already given us their opinion, and maybe it led to amendments, maybe it didn't lead to amendments. I'm concerned that every single person we've had testify over the course of however many hearings we have now will all want to testify that night, as opposed to just, the individuals, that's like their only way to let us know how they feel. They don't have the access to us that a lot of those other more elevated people have.
Well, and to be clear, that all of the people who have testified before will have the opportunity to testify again on the 20th. So I don't want you to
Get
be misled.
excited.
Yes. So, and could you touch on the public engagement process? We've had an extensive public engagement process.
I think the issue here, though, is that we know what the advocates' amendments are. We've received, successive emails and testimony from them. We have that list. In many cases, we have passed them along to the council administrator and asked them to be made into amendments. I think the issue here is I'm anticipating at least some number of technical amendments or updates to be coming at us from DPZ. And I know I'm in the process of having prepared and then whittling strategically what, besides my one very important amendment, that I will be filing. But like I said, I don't, maybe Oak Ridge is like, no, absolutely not. We want more townhomes across the street. It's for the public to see our amendments that have come out of however many hours of work session we sat here. So I don't know if we limit it to our amendments to a certain point. It will overlap because there are certainly advocate proposed amendments that our office has put in. But it's just, I keep going back to the 150 number from the last general plan. And so I'm like, if there's really going to be 150 amendments filed, like how, I'm going to need help from the public even just to maybe proofread some, you know what I mean? Like, there are always those guys who come in and say, you missed this one reference here. Like, there is value added, I think, in allowing people to come in versus just write in. Well, obviously we read it all too, but that I'm more concerned about the singularity of this exercise and how voluminous member and even administration generated amendments may be, and that we will collectively need help to vet them.
Okay, well, I think we should make sure to check with the full council, see where folks are. But I think you're right, that we should all be doing our due diligence to ensure that the amendments are out there to the public once they've been filed on the 25th, prior to the vote date on October 2nd, that they have this time to review, make sure they're seeing it, and provide their feedback. And depending on where the members are, potentially have another hearing or receive written feedback to be incorporated. Of September? Oh, no, October 15th?
No, for when we want to pre-file, like we have,
Oh, you want to
pre-file before?
Yes, and we can all pre-file earlier, and I think that my office will be trying to get them in the week prior as well.
I mean, that's another way to manage.
Right, so.
Our goal is to hopefully have all amendments that have been submitted drafted to the members, hopefully by the end of this week. We're really pushing hard to get them out to everybody. And then as far as the pre-file, certainly Office of Law has to see all the amendments, and they have not seen any. So that is another timing issue. But we will do our due diligence to meet whatever goals you guys have.
All right, Amanda. Office of Law is ready. And so with that, sorry, did you? Sorry, could you turn on your microphone? And
Yeah.
Yep.
Just one quick clarification, kind of going back to that map on page 14, the Route 1 corridor future land use. Just to be clear, so in some ways you're very right, Ms. Walsh, that these are parcel-based, but parcel-based is just the basis for our future land use map, not only this one, but the Flume map. That is just one component of it. Those are then kind of aggregated to these other type of character areas, which are the open space, the historic communities, the single-family neighborhood that are brought out to the street center line. So in many ways, this will determine the zoning, but in a very broad way. There are multiple zoning districts within these different character-based areas. So it's not a one-for-one.
But I do think, and we talked about this, that there's the flume, which was a little concerning, and then there was the pullout that was absolutely followed. I mean, it followed Chatham Station and not St. John's Plaza. And I'm not supportive of throwing out the flume, but I do think we need to make a pretty generalized statement that this is for illustration purposes. This isn't us picking, you get to do an activity center and you don't get to do an activity center, because we just, that's not going to work.
No, absolutely, and that's not the intent with this, but I thought it would kind of, we needed the further clarification of what this is and what it isn't.
Agreed. Great point.
All right, and with that note, we are 10 over, so go figure. Thank you all very much, and I am very excited for these amendment discussions. If you look back at the previous general plan, there was a lot of alignment through the council. They filed a lot of amendments where they had figured out that alignment, and I look forward to that partnership with everyone. So enjoy your days.
This meeting is no longer being recorded.